You are live on YouTube.
Thank you. The school committee is out of executive session. Mr. Majoros-Collins.
I'd like to make a motion to direct the superintendent to resolve the pending prohibited practices complaints against the Lewiston School Committee in the fastest and least disruptive way possible.
Second.
Any discussion? Ward 1,
No.
Ward 2,
Nope.
3,
Yes.
4. Oh, sorry, 4 is not here. 5. We didn't hear you, Linnea. I don't think you have any sound. We didn't hear any of it that time either.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. I need one of those stupid lapel mics. Yes.
Thank you. Ward 6,
Yes.
7,
Yes.
City Council Representative?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion passes by a vote of 6-2.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is the school committee member introductions and the introductions of our student representatives. We'll start with our senior representative, then our junior representative, and then go in our normal routine with Miss Avery moving forward.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
So I don't have much to say, but I'm just going to speak a little bit about like our COVID guidelines at school. And I'm just going to start by they're working really well so far. There haven't been that many cases, at least at the high school. And if there are, they haven't been spreading too rapidly. And I just want to note that the teachers have been doing a good job, from my personal view, with enforcing masks and even keeping kids from like taking them off and like arguing with them, which can also be an issue at times. And we're also, our school in general is just doing a good job supplying those masks if kids need them at all. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
I don't really have much to say either. I think if there was anything to say, Gemma said it wonderfully already. At least for this meeting, I feel like I'm just going to watch for the most part to watch the flow of the meetings, get used to it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jake.
So Omar is new to the school committee. I've known him for a few years now, or more than a few years now. Fantastic student, very artistic and expressive, great young man. I was so happy to see his nomination come forth from the leadership at Lewiston High School. And of course, Gemma is returning to us. She was with us last year up until we hit some COVID window challenges. And so their availability should be okay for the most part. Gemma is involved in some extracurriculars that may take her away during some meetings, and we'll revisit things. I want to make sure that she knows she can stay committed to her extracurriculars. So for right now, we have Gemma and Omar, and we may look up if there's too many conflicts and have Omar and a new senior representative. But I'm very, very happy that they could both join us tonight.
Thank you. Bobby, did you want to go ahead?
Oh, yes, Bobby Avery, Chief Administrative Officer.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Children Physical Ward 2.
Kiernan Majoros-Collins, Ward 3.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Ron Potvin, Ward 6.
Paul Bopelant, Ward 7.
Alicia Rice, City Council Representative.
Megan Parks, at-large representative.
And Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is the COVID-19 update. Mr. Superintendent Langley's will present.
So I wanted to follow up on a few things that are going on. One is the construction update. Member Potvin brought up some concerns last time. I went to the school to visit, went over into that team area to take a look at things and make sure things were clean and safe and things of that nature. I think it's doing pretty well. One area of concern that came up is there's a classroom that is it's an offshoot of a space, but we're going to look at getting more input from staff on maybe potentially some temp, I don't know about walls, but some kind of divider between the walk-through space and the space that adjoins it that's often used as a classroom space. I'll continue to check in on that, monitor it. Jay Dufour at the high school has done a pretty good job of communicating with them and looking after people's needs there. So we have a direct contact for that. Staffing is something we continue to monitor. Our levels are pretty steady, but we still continue to be mindful of people's needs. We do have a number of staff that are working remote that report that that's working well for them, large in part. But we still continue to monitor symptoms in people who are out day to day. Wednesdays, we still have our morning connections, and there's also components of specially designed instruction, student supports, interventions, and some groups that pull out. And I think people are getting into the routine. I know it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but part of what I'm hearing is that there's routine and people know what to expect. They know what their responsibilities are, large in part. And some have expressed that there's value in maintaining the routine so people can get rhythm and not changing it on people too much. So it's something that I keep in my mind for reflections. And before I open it up for questions, I didn't know if the committee wanted to discuss whether or not the Zoom format should continue or not. I know that we had reasons for our brief use of Zoom. It has its pros and cons. I just want to put it back out there to people to see if we are looking to meet back in person on the 22nd of February, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting. And if we are going to continue with Zoom, should we have discussions about protocols or what have you for how we conduct business on screen? I want to put that up to the committee, and I'll answer any questions you have.
I have a question that I got from a constituent today regarding having a discussion related to some local districts are adjusting their hybrid schedule and adding in an alternating Wednesday to cohorts A and B in order to increase the time that students are in school. And this person asked if we can have a discussion related to that and what potential complications that might create to try to do that.
Yeah, I think it's certainly a possibility. When I look at it, I think we would have to be mindful of the other things that are scheduled during those Wednesday windows and what it might bump, if you will, if a teacher has a typical class at that time. And that includes some of that additional support and interventions and specially designed instruction connected to special ed. We do some of those things on Wednesdays that don't fit in other days because teachers can't be in two places at once. So we would have to navigate how we do that. I think the other complication to a shift like that at this point in time, not that I disagree with students, us trying to find a way for students to be in school more, it's that routine. So is it my Wednesday? Is it somebody else's Wednesday? Which Wednesday is it? And I worry about, just hard to have that every other type of routine.
Thank you. Mr. Potvin.
Jake, I just want to thank you for jumping on that last week. The concerns of the high school, the feedback I've gotten is positive. So they're pleased that it was addressed and hope to see more improvement than even what has already happened. So I think they just felt like they were forgotten, and they're happy to see things moving along and being addressed. And as far as the Zoom goes, I've always been a vote for in person. I'm all set with this. So the sooner we get back to face and a regular meeting, I know several members have brought it up. They're not really sure why we're still Zooming at this point. So, I'm definitely ready to go back when you are.
Mr. Physick.
Yeah, I just want to add, I'm for in-person as well.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus Collins and then Mr. Beauplan.
I continue to be concerned about the pandemic and the potential health effects on students and staff. It's the reason why I've always been skeptical about how we're doing things this year. And it's the reason why in the abstract, I think these meetings ought to be on Zoom. But I think that it's outrageous for us to be sending staff members and students into buildings while we have meetings online. And so I think that if conditions are not safe enough for us to have meetings in person, and I think there's a strong argument to be made that they are not safe enough for us to have meetings in person, then I don't see how we can continue to send folks into buildings. And as long as we're sending folks into buildings, then we ought to be willing to meet in person.
Yes, Mr. Beauplan.
I certainly can't argue with Mr. Majerus Collins's logic. It makes total sense. And I, again, echo the thoughts of several that let's go back to face-to-face meetings and set the example. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. A.
I also agree with the two folks before me, but I would ask, will there still be a Zoom option for any member of the school committee who self-screens and identifies themselves as probably not belonging in an in-person meeting? Yes. And what is the proper procedure that you would like those folks to follow to have that set up? I know it takes some extra effort on the tech side of things.
Yeah, I think if you just let the chair know or myself, we can get you connected to it.
Okay, and one final question for folks who are on Zoom, does the same policy remain under this chair as did the last chair, where video must be on to participate in the meeting?
So I don't know that we had Zoom meetings under the previous chair, did we? I don't know.
Yes.
I think that when we're in a public meeting, cameras should be on anyways, but I don't think I realized that that was a policy or that had even been a discussion. Mr. Langley's.
Just remember, right, because I know that the city council is meeting via Zoom. Can you share some of the procedures connected to the city meetings?
Sure. So the mayor, as the presiding officer, requests that video is on for each person participating, even staff or not constituents, but staff who come into the meeting need to be on video as well. Under the previous chair of the school committee last March through, I guess, June, it was requested that video was on by every participant as well. So just wanted to clarify that under this new term that we have.
Yes, I support that. I think everybody should have their video on in a meeting. Yes. Mr. Majerus Collins.
Yeah, I've got a question regarding the state stipulations for virtual meetings. And I may be just making this up out of thin air, but I thought that early on, we occasionally had members with a need to phone into these meetings. It's possible that we'll have members who have a need to phone in again. And so I just want to, my inclination would be for the maximum possible participation. But obviously, when members are conducting business, they ought to, try to have their screens on.
Thank you. Mr. Physick.
Just clarify question. We need to step away from the screen. Are we keeping the screens on or are we shutting it off?
Like when we take a break or something?
Well, let's just say that, sometimes you can't wait till the actual break comes up. So I just want to make sure I got the proper procedure. If we need to, are we keeping it on? Or are we shutting it off when we walk away?
I think that if you need to step away, you can turn your camera off.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ms. Ray?
Just since I brought up the self-screener, Superintendent Langlois, could you reshare that with this committee? What those questions are that we should ask ourselves before attending in person each Monday?
Yes, I can, and I can share a document with you as well. But you should not have had a fever over 104 in the last 24 hours that was treated with a fever-reducing medication. Other major symptoms include headache, sore throat, cough, shortness of breath, GI concerns, things of that nature. I can get you a complete sheet if that would be helpful, but I do think that everyone needs to symptom monitor before attending a meeting.
And I know that there had been, there was an email, I think it was a constituent had asked when our student reps would be returning. And I know one of the replies was that we weren't sure how they were going to fit in our table if they were going to attend live at our meetings when we went back live. Do you know if that's been resolved or if we'll still have the 6-foot distancing?
I'll have to look at that, and I may depend week to week on what the student participation availability is. I could take a look at that. I also don't want them to be outside of their comfort zone. It's fully understood if people want to participate via Zoom.
Thank you. Was that your full update also, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is for now. Things are chugging along. We've been pretty fortunate, I think, since we've returned. We've had a couple of things pop up, as you are well aware. The middle school is working with a very limited nutrition staff. Other staff in the building and other areas of nutrition have stepped up to make sure that that's possible because of a close contact situation within the kitchen there. And we continue to monitor things closely. There was a new one, as you know, late last night. That came up with a student who tested positive or got notice that they were positive. That was at LRTC. Again, they pod their classes. They don't mix back and forth, so it was a pretty isolated group. There are some ed techs in that classroom that were impacted. We've had some other things pop up that have not disrupted school. I don't issue community letters for those, but for example, there's a student that tested positive that is enrolled at Connors but has not been in attendance since we've returned, so it does not disrupt the school itself. I do try to put those in the dashboard so that we have an accurate count. But I'm trying to save the bigger communications for when it's a disruption to the school.
Ms. Ray?
Thank you. Superintendent Langlois, is there any update on vaccine clinic and time for folks, just from anecdotal experience with folks needing the time off of work to go get the vaccine, but then also if they experience any of the minor but inconvenient side effects of it?
Yeah, so we're getting closer and closer, as you know. I actually heard today from Aslan Litton, actually from the LEA, that she heard a rumor that it was going to be more like April before Tier 1B went because of the shift in the age grouping. So we're going to continue to monitor that. I have a meeting tomorrow morning via Zoom with some local medical health professionals. I'm hopeful to get an update there. I've extended an offer for our facilities. I've extended an offer for certified sites, coordination. Our nurses have offered to assist in any way they can. I've explained our facilities and how it might be conducive to certain things. And also shared our intent that when it is time to vaccinate, that we have all members of our staff connected to our kids. Beyond that list, including our substitutes, coaches, bus drivers, things of that nature. So we're hopeful to help facilitate. So that's a quick update on vaccine. We don't have those answers yet. As you know, there's some cogs in that machine that have slowed up. There's a federal site that was supposed to help coordinate who got what, where, and when, and their secondary dose with some automation to it that did not work. They're working on fixing that or doing something different. The supply of vaccines, of course, it's constantly shifting. And again, the rules around who's going to get what when had shifted a little bit over the last couple of weeks. So we continue to monitor that. As far as testing goes, we put in for to be a site to potentially do the Binex on site with our staff at our locations. And we continue to work with our community partners to offer testing opportunities. Some of those are spotty right now, but we're looking at doing another thing where we have like an afternoon window where if someone who works for Lewiston Public Schools feels the need, they can go get tested. We meet on that again tomorrow. So I'm hopeful that will come to fruition. If it goes the way the application reads, we will have much more local control to do those tests. I don't know the specific volume that's yet to be answered by the response connected to the grant, but that could be a real potential, a bit of a game changer for our staff and potentially, if we have the volume, some students that might have a concern.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus Collins, you had your hand up? Did you still want to speak?
Yeah, sure. Just briefly. I just wanted to ask about, obviously we have students coming into our schools. We have staff members coming into our schools. Superintendent Langlis, do we have anyone else who's currently allowed to come into our schools or coming into our schools on any kind of, well, I guess at all, but then especially on any kind of regular basis?
Yeah, there's a handful of others. There are providers that still come into our schools to do certain things when they can't do it remotely. It's limited in its scope. We do have coaches coming in for activities when they are on. We have, of course, the construction at the high school, which we're looking to mitigate as much as humanly possible. Our substitutes come in from different places. They're not everyday staff, I guess, if you will. We really do try to limit it. There are some things such as facilities may need to have someone come in to look at a heating control system or things of that nature, but where everybody signs in and we monitor who's been in and where. So it's pretty limited, but I don't want to say that it's none.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Damon?
Jake, could you just touch on MPA ruling about spring sports and football?
Yeah, the latest I have on MPA is they were heavily considering doing a spring and or summer football program. A lot of questions came up around that. And some of the questions that I raised to the superintendent's group include a number of students who are seniors who are either preparing for or headed off to college, trying to make money to help assist their situation to go to college. Underclassmen or women that would be entering immediately into their next season without any rest, complications about their summer camps and other activities they might want to participate in. Title IX concerns, if you're doing this for a team that is boys, what else are you offering? And then, the famous question of what about everything else? So if you, from an academic recovery conversation to, what if football is not your thing, but something else is, and you don't have that opportunity because they picked one sport over the other. And that's before I get into the fact that it would be not budgeted, not planned for, mixed field use. There's so many layers to that. So those are some of the factors that led into the decision to choose not to have spring or summer football. And what they were trying to do was move the season from the fall to the spring or summer underneath the umbrella, at least in my opinion, of they did 7-on-7 in the fall and a lot of kids could not participate in full.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is the consent agenda. Are there any items that members want to have removed from the consent agenda? Hearing no objections, the consent agenda is adopted. Agenda item number 7 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now or on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or student issues should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, or affiliation with Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on non-agenda items?
I don't see any hands at this time.
Agenda item number 8, to receive an update regarding employee retention and substitute pay. And it says that HR Director Kim Brown will present.
Karen, if you could bring Beth in as well, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, hello, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Beth.
Bobby, should I just jump right in? All right. Well, again, my name is Kim Brown. I am the Human Resources Director. This is the first school committee meeting that I have been in attendance in this position, so it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. In your packet, I will just walk through the documents that are there and pause for questions as they come up. But the first document that you should have as part of your packet outlines the average active employees within Lewiston Public Schools, and that is broken down by location, by bargaining unit, by employee type. This document really is for reference as we look at the second page, which outlines the turnover percentages broken down in similar groupings. So that the first page is so you have a framework as we deal with percentages on the next document. So if we go to that second document, it's titled Staff Turnover Rates, Terminations for September 2020 through December 2020. The leftmost table goes through our terminations by location. And we have had 24 so far up to December 2020. These numbers are very similar to the turnover rates by location at this point last academic year. We had 22 as of this time last year. The big difference, the major change over last year's data is in nutrition. This time last year, there had not been any turnover. And as we see in the nutrition department here, we have had 4 separations. As we drill a little bit further down into this data, we see that 2 of these were retirements, 1 was a resignation for personal reasons, and 1 was a dismissal, which was separation in line with the contractual language when an employee has not been in a working status for over 6 months. So while this is a very large increase from 0 to 6.2% within a department, as we look at the reasons for separations, it's not a big area of concern at this point, but a point to be watching. Again, at the bottom of this the leftmost table, we see that the average turnover rate is 2.3%. Again, that is 24 terminations, and it has risen over last year. Last year was 2.1% at 22 separations. So not a substantial change. If we look at the center table by bargaining unit, we do see a slightly different distribution between bargaining units over last year. Certified professionals have 2 separations. Last year we were at 6. And again, the 4 separations difference we find in the nutrition department, as I just covered in the last table. The center table, both the top and the bottom, drill a little bit further into the departments within our instructional staff. We see regular instruction, special education, and ELO. A large portion of our separations occur in the ed tech bargaining unit and particularly in special education. If we look at the center bottom table, we can see that the instructional staff they're just in greater detail here between certified professionals and ed techs. A point that I just wanted to highlight as we look at this center 9 of the 13 additions from September to December were in BHP positions. This time last year, 3 of 12 were from BHP positions. And so I took a few minutes and looked more closely at those separation reasons for people in our BHP positions. 2 gave no reason, 2 cited family reasons, 2 cited career opportunities, 1 cited medical reasons, and there was 1 retirement. So I don't believe that there are any conclusions that we can draw at this point from this data, but it is, again, another point that I will be watching closely, as that's a change over last year. And then finally, on this document that you have on the right, we have termination reasons. So for every resignation that we have, we try to understand why they are deciding to leave Lewiston Public Schools. If it is not clear by resignation letter or the notice that they have given, a member of our HR staff calls to try to glean more information to understand more about their situation. And so again, it is fairly dispersed over numerous termination reasons. We do see here the highest is career opportunity. We've had 7 separations between September and December where they have cited that they're moving to another career opportunity. And so that's just a very high level view of this staff turnover report. Are there any questions? If I may stop for questions here. Okay, no questions? All right. Now moving forward, I would just like to talk about our substitute pool, and Beth Bowie, who is our sub recruiter, is also here with us. So she may chime in if there are any questions, and I am not as well acquainted with the details as she is. But our sub pool, as of the end of December, is 226 substitutes. This time last year, we were at 254. So we are down about 28 substitutes. But this decrease, we feel, is largely attributed to less substitutes overall applying to work in this capacity within our schools. I think COVID concerns are impacting the number of applicants that we see, as well as the fact that last year, we took a pause on recruiting efforts from March through August, primarily due to the unknowns of what school was going to look like in the fall. We didn't want to bring a whole lot of people on board in this capacity and then not have any work for them, depending on what school looked like when we resumed in the fall. But since September, Beth has added 24 substitutes. Now, again, this is down from last year. We hired 74 subs from September to December this time last year. Another big change with our sub pool is that we have gone from 1 to 2 building subs at every school to 4 building subs at every school, with the exception of the middle school. They currently have 2 building substitutes, and that number is working very well for that school. If we look closely at the charts that were included in the packet, we can see the trend that we are needing less substitute coverage than this time last year. And we believe that this is in part due to the fact that we're able to accommodate a lot of remote work for those who are high-risk individuals in this environment, and when there's a need to quarantine for instructional staff and students. So we are able to have those teachers still participate in their role. We have, though there has been a decrease in the overall need to fill substitute or to fill absences and vacancies, our fill rates have remained about the same compared to this time last year. And this is because we have about 70 substitutes of that 226 that I mentioned before that have not yet taken an assignment this year. This is largely due to COVID concerns. We have a large group of retired teachers who lend us their expertise as part of our sub pool, who have expressed concern about returning at this time, but they're very eager to return and participate in our sub pool when they are able. And so they are remaining as part of our roster, but they are not actively taking positions at this time. So less than half of our subs are actively working and continuously picking up assignments to cover our substitute needs, which accounts for the same percentage of fill rate, but having a lesser demand this year. We have 11 subs in long-term ed tech positions, filling primarily vacancies. And we have 6 substitutes holding long-term teacher assignments at this time. Also included in the packet are 2 forms that just outline some of the pay changes that we have put in place, a comparison between pre-COVID and current COVID rates that we are following to compensate our substitutes. And so with that, I'll pause there if there are any questions about our subpool.
Mr. Potvin, and then Mr. Medeiros-Collins.
Ms. Brown, just wondering, walk me through the situation where, just for the round numbers, for the sake of discussion, you have 50 openings to fill in the schools one day, but yet you only have 40 substitutes. What happens to those 10 positions that are either out sick or not filled? What happens at that point?
I believe that our building administrators do a great job in pulling the coverage that they need from other classrooms and other educators to fill in those slots. We do have the 4 building sub positions that are, if an absence that goes out to the regular subpool is not picked up and filled by someone in our daily subpool, the building administrators also still have their building subs. If they are not already placed on an assignment, they have those 4 substitutes to maneuver around the building as well to provide appropriate coverage.
I want to add real quick, Ron, it's a great question, but the real answer is, as Kim said, we use building subs and then we borrow from somewhere to cover things. So it's taking from an area that should have different coverage and using open blocks, using whatever timeframes are available to cover things.
Go ahead, Mr. Medeiros-Collins.
So I want to really hone in on this point because I think that it's not a glamorous or sparkly issue, sub-fill rates and whether we're filling vacancies or not, but it's crucially important because, as anyone who worked in a school will tell you, when you have a classroom teacher who's out sick and you can't fill the vacancy with a sub, you can't just leave it unfilled. You're pulling an ed tech off of something that they ought to be doing, helping a kid, or you're taking a specials teacher and saying, guess what, there's no music today. I think that that it's really important for us to appreciate the detrimental effects that cascade down from failing to fill these sub positions, and it's in that vein that I want to offer a motion on sub pay, but I do want to allow Ms. Brown to complete her presentation before consideration of that motion.
Yeah. If I may just comment on that, I know that, as I mentioned, the numbers are very different than they are last year as far as the number of subs that we have added to the pool. But I will say that Beth is doing a fantastic job identifying great candidates and bringing folks in, making sure that we find a good fit for these substitutes. And so I think that I just want to commend Beth on everything that she's doing to bolster our sub pool, given the just environment that we're recruiting in. It's very interesting, an interesting time to bring folks in into a temporary role into a school system. So I think she's doing a great job, but I agree. Our efforts are always to get our sub fill rates up as high as we can.
Mr. Physick.
I guess in reality, some not every school, but some schools, it's not the music teacher that's getting pulled. It's your ed techs from special ed, your ed techs from EL are getting pulled first. Then if it hasn't gotten that bad, then it's music. But the people that need help the most, that's where the staff's getting pulled. Also, like to comment after your presentation on retention as well.
Ms. Ray.
Director Brown, you mentioned folks who might be retired teachers coming back as subs. Have those folks just anecdotally indicated that they will plan to come on back once, the global health emergency is resolved? I realize that's a very broad statement, but.
Yeah. Beth, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but Beth, I think, yeah.
Absolutely. I receive emails daily from subs that are expressing interest or saying, I can't wait to be back in that classroom. I can't wait to get that vaccine, that are on the edge saying, I want to be back with these kids. So I think, we have probably a group of 20 to 30 that are in that arena that I stay in touch with and just check in to see where they're at. And I think they'll be back. They definitely will be back. We keep them on payroll. They keep their fingerprint certification up to date and are just waiting for that opportunity to be back in the classroom. We have had some opportunities to use some substitutes remotely. So that has also been effective in cases where that's appropriate. So for those who might have concerns, we've been able to do that in a few areas. So the administrative team has been very creative, to say the least, in trying to make sure that we are giving the coverage that we need. And I think that, come this spring, I'm really hoping we're going to see some increases in that, as well as I can say that we have student teachers out there that are not necessarily, they're there for obviously part of their practicums, but today I even had to reach out that a student teacher and a teacher, there was a need and they needed to pull that teacher. So we immediately went in, we created a vacancy. We got that student teacher who was on our sub list in, and she covered her own classroom that day. So another her mentor teacher could go to a different classroom. So, I think that we're always looking for an opportunity where we find to fill a hole. And I think there's a large anxiousness of the sub team to be back in the classroom as soon as they can.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments before Ms. Brown continues? Okay, thank you.
I don't know that I have anything more for the committee. Yep. Oh, unless there are more questions that I can answer.
Mr. Majoros Collins.
No, Director Brown, I really appreciate your presentation. And, I appreciate all the folks who are doing so much to try to make sure that we have coverage here. At the conclusion of this conversation, now I think is an opportunity for the school committee to take a step forward and recognize that we can assist your work, we can assist Ms. Bowie's work if we have a more competitive pay scale for substitutes. And with that in mind, I'd make a motion to raise daily substitute pay for both teacher substitutes and ed tech substitutes to $105 a day.
Is there a second?
I would second, but I would debate the procedure. I think you would want to, is there a motion provided on the agenda?
It would be my perspective that the item being on the agenda indicates that there's a possibility for action on the item.
Item number 8 on the rationale indicates no motion required. So if he is making a motion, I would think that maybe the rules would need to be suspended for this, as the agenda does not specify a motion.
In that case, and I would ask going forward that perhaps we just make sure that agendas provide for the possibility of votes to avoid having to do this sort of thing. But I would make a motion to suspend the rules to consider raising substitute pay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Potman? Did you, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I just ask where are we right now at substitute pay? And what is this, bringing this forward, was there an expectation that regardless of what we're doing, there's going to be movement to increase the substitute pay?
So I don't know if it's a question for me or not.
Anybody?
I can tell you that our current substitute pay is $100 a day for teachers and $90 a day for ed techs, which compares slightly unfavorably to Auburn, which is $100 a day for each. $105 a day would put us at $15 an hour.
And the pay rate for the building subs is $150 per day?
Correct.
Okay.
To answer your question, Mr. Potvin, we did not have an expectation to bring that forward this evening.
Any further discussion before we make a vote on to suspend the rules? Mr. Langley.
Want to make sure that if we do in fact suspend the rules, that what we're talking about are the specific categories. I just want to make sure that if there's a motion that we're clear about it.
Sure, I can clarify further. This is to suspend the rules to consider raising daily substitute teacher pay and daily substitute ed tech pay.
To 105, is that what you're saying?
I mean, that's going to be the next motion. Yeah, but this is, I would just encourage everybody to vote to suspend the rules so we can have a conversation and do the deliberation.
Any further discussion on suspending the rules? Ward 1. Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
6.
No.
7.
Yes.
City Council.
Yes.
Yes.
I apologize, Member Damon, I didn't hear yours.
He voted no, but Bruce, would you like to say your vote again?
I'd be happy to. No.
Motion passes 6-2 to suspend the rules.
Member Majoris Collins.
Thank you. I now make a motion to raise daily substitute teacher pay to $105 and daily substitute ed tech pay to $105.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Ray.
Director Brown, could you talk about why there's a differential currently between ed tech daily and teacher daily, and if that is no longer provided for, does that complicate things?
I believe that the difference in the pay is the level of responsibility that is expected of the sub in the classroom for the assignments that they choose. I believe that it will, I don't know the staff trends well enough, so I may let Beth speak to this, but there is oftentimes a greater focus on filling the teacher positions prior to filling the ed tech positions. And so the higher rate draws a candidate that's qualified for both positions to take the teacher position over the ed tech position on any given day as they're selecting daily assignments. But I'll let Beth speak to that more.
I would second what Kim is saying. The difference is really the responsibility of the class. So an ed tech does not have necessarily the responsibility of the class. They are working with alongside another teacher. So they're responsible for following the lesson plan, really the administration of the day. So I do know that many people prefer one role over the other. So for several reasons, they prefer the differences in that role. Some people want to be there to teach, some want to be there to assist. So I think there is a different group that prefers each role. And I think the $10 difference is justified probably for that case.
Okay, I would ask the maker and seconder, oh boy, of the motion if they'd be willing to do 110 for teachers just to keep some differentiation. I think it's worth considering that since it was already built in and that is a priority, but I'm eager to hear what other folks want to weigh in on that.
Mr. Majerus Collins.
So if what member Ray is suggesting is 110 for teachers and 105 for ed techs, I'm of course willing to vote for that. I want to speak to this from a perspective of someone who spent about 3 months, 4 months as a substitute teacher across the river. And obviously in Auburn, their pay scale is the same. And one of the things that I can tell you is that, you know, especially during COVID, but under normal times too, if somebody walks into the building with a substitute assignment, there is no guarantee that that is the assignment that they're going to be filling that day. What we want to see in substitutes is a willingness to be flexible, to accept a role that is going to help the school navigate that day. And I can tell you that, as an example, I, on a number of occasions, had signed up to be a substitute for a 4th grade teacher or a 5th grade teacher, only to go in and see they were pulling someone to cover that, and they wanted me to cover the person who was being pulled, and sometimes that person is an ed tech. Now, it doesn't matter if you're paying the people the same amount of money, but if there's a difference of 10%, as there currently is, that's a massive hit for people who are already not making that much money. Now, given that the 110 and 105 would put us, you know, in a competitive situation compared to other comparable districts, and also be a considerable improvement for folks who are doing the work now, I would support a friendly amendment to make it 110 and 105 if the district wanted to maintain some degree of separation. But what I can tell you is that the idea that because a substitute picks up a particular job, that ends up being the job that they do, is really not that's not at all a one-to-one situation.
Mr. Beaupelon, are you interested in?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ray, did you have another question?
I mean, I was just going to clarify with the staff here in Lewiston Public Schools that might be practice at Auburn Public Schools, but is that reflective of how things happen here when someone goes into frontline and picks an assignment? Is that not necessarily the assignment they complete?
So it can be creative day to day.
Okay.
When I said we rob one to pay the other, I meant it. It's
Okay.
what we need and to have adults with our kids and to do the very best we can. And I guess a couple of thoughts. One is, you know, the tasks, they are different in that sense. And I know that we have had a procedure in place, at least internally, where if you're an ed tech and you cover a teacher for the day, we actually compensate you differently. I would also add that while people aren't assigned with guarantees, we do have some subs that have made it very well known to us that they'd like to do what they signed up for and not be just shuffled around. And we try to be mindful of that, so we don't take away the experience that they wanted to contribute to as well. And I guess my last point this time is I don't have a good sense of what this would cost, and I didn't know if this should go to committee for analysis and be brought back soon. But I wasn't anticipating this one, and I don't have a cost estimate of any kind.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarifications.
Mr. Beaupelon.
Yeah, 3 quick points. When I started teaching in 1975, the pay rate was $20 a day. Secondly, I see on a daily basis what our substitutes do, what our ed techs do, how the changing nature of the job. They had different responsibilities and concerns pre-COVID when they'd have a class of 22, you know, trying to climb out the windows in some cases, as opposed to the COVID situation. And finally, I don't want to be considered hypocritical because I've said in executive and in public sessions that I don't really like throwing money at a problem. But this is a class of workers that I agree totally with Mr. Majerus Collins is underpaid, overworked. I totally would urge my colleagues to support the motion to bring some sense of, not the word stability, but some decent pay for a tough job. Thank you.
Ms. Hawkins.
While I am in agreement with Mr. Collins and Ms. Ray's addendum, I want to make sure that we're not getting in the way of anything along the lines of negotiations or contracts. And I also want to make sure that we take a look at the financial cost of this before we take a huge jump. Not to say I don't want to do it. I just want to make sure that we're measured in how we do it. I don't want to see us write a blank check and then be like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap.
Are we able to kind of predict a ballpark of what this would cost right now during this meeting? Ms. Avery?
I'm not comfortable throwing out a number tonight, but I would ask the committee to consider allowing us to do some analytical work and bring back a number to you for the next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus Collins.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to point out to everybody that when we're talking about substitutes, we're talking about people with, you know, no job stability, no guaranteed pay increases, no labor representation. You know, Member Hawkins, when you mention negotiations, this would be a whole different ballgame if substitutes were represented by a union. Unfortunately, they're not at the moment, and so in some respects, it's incumbent upon us to be advocates for decent pay and decent working conditions for these folks. You know, I don't think that $15 an hour for people who we're entrusting with care of our students is really too much to ask. I think that I have every faith that our district will find a way to meet that relatively meager obligation. I strongly agree with Member Beaupelot. I think that you don't spend a lot of time thinking about substitutes until you start working in schools, and then suddenly it's painfully clear how important they are and how needed they are when they're not there. And so, you know, I just think it's important that we honor their work and give them a decent day's pay for it. The 105 that I initially indicated is a reflection of $15 an hour at 7 hours a day. And I support Member Ray's suggestion, and obviously that's currently what's on the table. But I don't think that our district should say to people, well, geez, you know, sorry, but we want you to do this difficult and crucially important job for, you know, less than minimum wage in a lot of places.
Mr. Potvin.
So we have a lot of competing interest coming up this year in a budget cycle, and where this came out of the clear blue and there really wasn't any expectation for presenting a raise, I just caution the committee that this is something that should be funneled through administration and the subcommittee for evaluation. Bobby, I don't know how if you've done it yet, but I've done my numbers, and we might be looking as much as $100,000 a month there. We're talking $10 on several hundred people for a 6-hour, you know, for the day, for 5 days of the week, you know, and just estimating that. I mean, when you're getting up into that several $100,000 to $1 million range for non-committed temporary staff, I just throw it out that, you know, we have a lot of commitments to the people who are tenured, long-term professionals. Now, it's my understanding these temps don't necessarily come fully prepared with full master's degrees, et cetera, so on. They may have some level, but, you know, you're talking about a different level of activity altogether. And I would just ask that this be tabled until the administration, and if seen appropriate, the subcommittee on finance can take a look at this and really chew on the numbers.
Parliamentarian, does ask a request for table require a second?
I believe so, but let me check.
Thank you.
And are you asking to table or to refer to committee?
I think having as many eyes on as possible. So I'll go refer to committee.
Okay.
Ms. Parks, I just want you to know that there is a
I see Miss Sarah May just
comment.
stand up. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, sorry, I'm super off base here. Let me just Google it.
Kieran, did you want to speak while she's looking that up, or?
That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just want to stress that that these folks who are working in these positions, not exclusively, not to a person, but by and large, are devoted, are an important part of our school community, are essential to providing a decent education to children. And I mean, Member Papa may disagree, but I don't think that a master's degree should be required to make $15 an hour.
The ruling on the motion to lay on the table or refer to committee does require a second. It's not debatable or amendable and requires a majority vote. Sorry that I couldn't grab that quickly.
Thank you. Is there a second for Mr. Potvin's referring to committee?
I will.
Miss Hawkins seconds. And Mr. Damon, did you want to speak?
I would second it as well.
Okay.
I have a point of order for the chair.
Yes.
At some point, I think we should allow the member of the public who's indicated an interest in speaking on this to do that, especially before we take a vote that may resolve the issue one way or the other.
Definitely. That's what I was going to next after we got the procedural things out of the way. Karen, are you going to add her in?
Hi there, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kira Soramato. I am a teacher at McMahon Elementary. I would just like to say, this feels very similar to the debate about, well, why should we pay minimum wage 15 when, EMTs are not even making that. But I would like to say, I find it kind of disturbing to discover through the course of this meeting that building subs are making more than an 8-year vested ed tech with a bachelor's degree in our district. While I understand that ed techs have benefits that a building sub does not, I think that if you are considering raising sub pay, you should also be looking at what we are demanding of our ed techs in our schools and the pay that is accommodating that. Right now, we literally have subs who do not have college degrees being paid more than an ed tech who has worked for our district for almost a decade. And I think that that is a very important thing to look at when the school committee is again looking at bargaining agreements with ed techs. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Mr. Majerus Collins. Is this discussion related to the motion to refer to committee or?
No.
I think we need to.
No, my understanding was the parliamentarian indicated that the motion to refer to committee was not debatable, but that may have just been a motion to table. I'm not sure.
Motion to table is not debatable. Motion to refer to committee is debatable.
Okay, in that case, this comment pertains to the motion to refer to committee. And I want to just remind everyone on the committee that what is being considered here tonight, what I'm proposing here tonight, is an increase in the pay for daily subs. I'm not talking about the building sub pay. That's not part of this conversation. I'm talking specifically about our base level of pay for substitutes who are filling in for our teachers and for our ed techs. And I obviously feel that there are a lot of other folks in our system who deserve better pay as well, including regular ed techs. At the moment, what we're talking about is those regular daily building subs who are making, in some cases, $90 a day before taxes.
Is there any discussion, further discussion on referring this discussion to committee? If not, Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
3,
No.
5,
Yes.
6,
Yes.
7,
No.
City Council?
No.
Yes.
The motion to send to the, I would assume, Finance Subcommittee by a vote of 5-3.
Thank you. Ms. Brown or Ms. Bowie, do either of you have any further discussion? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. Mr. Physick. Sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
I just wanted to publicly commend Beth Bowie for all of the work that she's been doing as our sub recruiter. She's amazing. She's incredible. We are very lucky to have you, Beth. So thank you for working so hard for our students and staff and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby.
I've seen the progression over the years of how hard it's been for us to get and retain subs, and this looks much better than I've seen it look for several years. So I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kudos to you both. Thank you so much.
Sorry. Mr. Physick.
My question for Kimberly, is that the latest? Is that all the data that you have as far as breakdowns of turnover rates? Do you have any data that goes back further than that?
Yes, there is data. I will say that for the past couple of years, the termination reasons has grown. We've gotten more granular in the reasons as to why people are leaving the district, but we do have prior year data in a format similar to this, as well as in other forms that we could go back if there's a particular point that you wanted research on, or if there's anything that you needed me to speak to more broadly for an expanded period of time.
Okay. Also, as well, as everyone knows, I've been a big proponent of speaking up for the teachers, and this is some of my concerns. And let me say this: from talking to a lot of teachers, I asked them, why you stay, and a lot of them said, mostly it was like the first answer was the kids. They love the kids of Lewiston. The people who have left even say the first thing they say is that they miss the kids. And some people, they say they stayed because, they were treated like a professional. They say they stayed because, they were comfortable here. They stayed because why learn all the new procedures going to another school when, they've already finally got comfortable in the school that they're in. Some of my concerns is this, is that there's a payback or reimbursement for school people, that if you take a class that you're getting reimbursed. And one of my concerns is that on the sheet that tracks that there's teachers on there that make $35,000 to $45,000 if you're lucky. And one of my concerns was that there's administration on there that's getting paid a lot more, and that some of the other people aren't getting some of the people who aren't getting paid as much aren't getting their classes approved to further education. So like there was some assistant principals on there, there was some Dingley folks on there, and my concern is that again, people who are getting paid a whole lot less than people who are making 90 or above 100,000 are not getting their classes approved. Another thing I like to look at is this, as far as the hiring process goes, if I put an application in for a school, Do you look at that, or does a principal look at that?
So to answer your final question, we assign hiring managers to every requisitions, every position that we post. And so it is primarily building administrators that look at the applicants that come in for the many positions that we have posted.
So go ahead, Superintendent, hop in.
Just real quick, there's some other areas that have different representation. So like ELL would run through the ELL office, special education will kind of collaborate, building principal and special education director. So there are some crossover areas, but for the most part, it's building principals.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah.
So my concern would be this: if somebody worked at a school and maybe they had a bad experience, and maybe the teacher and principal to get along, and that when they apply, and let's say they leave, let's just say they leave the district and they try to come back, let's say 6 months later or down the road, and they go apply again, usually what's probably going to happen is, from talking to administration, they're going to call the former principal, is going to get a call from the new person who's looking for that person. And if they give a bad report, necessarily they're not going to go further on with that person. And not necessarily that there's going to be something that person did initially bad. Maybe there were some other contributing factors in that. And I'm concerned that person who's trying to come back to our district, maybe they were burnt out or whatever the circumstances are, that they're not going to get a fair look at coming back to our district, because they've gotten this former bad report off the former principal, and that the evaluations that they have are outstanding. But again, if they had issues with the principal before, or some other issues that's gone on, how do you ensure that this person that's applying to come back to the district at a new school is getting a fair opportunity to come back to our school system?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have a complete or comprehensive answer for you this evening. I will say that no one is pre-screened out of the candidate pool, so everyone that applies is attached there. And we do have opportunity for new applicants or returning applicants to submit their own letters of reference. So something to substantiate their work history that maybe happened in the gap when they left and came back. But we also do certainly feel that it's important to one, make sure that we resolve personnel matters. Hopefully it doesn't come to a time when somebody separates. So we hopefully through some proactive steps, we can resolve that tension between the employee and the building administrator. But if there is any there, I think that there still is potentially room for some very objective feedback about a prior employee's performance. So I can't say that the hiring process can be or should be completely isolated from that, but I will definitely look into how we can make sure that every candidate is given a fair and equitable look as part of the hiring process.
So
sorry, I thought you were done. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is these scenarios that I'm bringing up are all real world scenarios. This isn't just something that I'm just coming out of the blue and saying, hey, we should be looking at this. These are all real world scenarios that have taken place in the district in the last couple of years as well. Also too, and I know this has nothing to do with you, but superintendent. So I think since we've talked prior on the committee about a culture of if you say something that you almost be listed as blacklisted, I guess is kind of the way to say it. And the reason why I'm asking this is because it's a reality, and I understand your position. You're gonna have to defend your building administrators, but when teachers are emailing you saying, I don't want to say anything, don't mention my name, and when you have people who are in good standing with their schools, and we're talking about different things, how to improve curriculum, and they say, they have some great ideas. Well, I asked, well, why don't you bring it up? They said, well, I can't bring it up because I would lose my good standing. And, I don't know how do you change that, but it happens in our district, and we need to kind of take a stand of saying that, you know, as long as you're doing it on a professional level, there's nothing wrong with trying to offer change and offer that. And it comes from the top down, because you go into some of the schools and you talk to a lot of the teachers, they will not go to certain teams on the academic, certain fifth, like let's just say if they're a sixth grade teacher, they won't go down to a fifth grade team because they might feel like they say, hey, those people don't work together. They don't work together well. And it seemed like there's a underlying culture of necessarily within our schools of not working together well. And I understand everyone has a different opinion, not everyone has to agree. But I think if we start from the top down saying, hey, we're all going to work together, and not working together is unacceptable. And if you have something good, you know, bring it on board, and it's not considered a speaking against necessarily the principal. So I don't know if there's an answer for that, but I just felt the need to bring that on teachers' behalf. Megan, I'm done.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I guess I want to respond to that, you know, the best I can. And we have had conversations about that, Member Physic. And the real challenge that I have with it, one is I've tried to look into things that I become aware of, and then, but I'm not aware of so many things because people want to speak in anonymity. So I can't look into something because I don't even know who it is. And even I would need more information. So without information, me, HR, we can't act on things to make sure that those practices are corrected. And another thing that I've had shared with me, and again, I'm not claiming this as an excuse of any sort, one direction or another, is that sometimes that the fear of retaliation or what have you, you just mentioned the teams, it actually has nothing to do with administration. It's teacher to teacher conversations and concerns that land there. And we can look into those dynamics, but someone would have to share them with us. But I am hopeful, you know, as being someone who just came on in July, 6 months in, that we are starting to shift our culture, and that we are thinking about how we collect input more holistically. And it's going to take time, but I think we're going to prove that we're open to it, and prove that over and over again, even if there's barriers and other challenges, that we rise above those and we continue to do the right things.
Thank you. Beth, were you going to answer his other question, or?
It looks like
No.
Bobby had one to say.
Okay. Bobby.
Yeah, I just, to that, Mr. Physic, I do want to say to everyone out there that we in HR take that very seriously. And if there are folks that feel that that's happening to, we have a great brand new HR director who I would highly encourage you to contact and have a discussion with Kim about those things. We really are committed to making sure that we have a safe, inclusive environment in which everyone feels that they're valued. And if you're not, please, 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 we can't do anything to fix it if we don't know. So please reach out to our HR department.
Mr. Beaupont.
Yeah, I'd like to address Mr. Physic's first concern, and I don't mean to be a Pollyanna here, but I have a hard time believing that there are more than a few bad exceptions of a teacher getting on the bad side of a principal. It's more than just a subjective judgment. I'm hoping that when we get to item 12, an article of a point that I brought up at the last meeting, that we see that there are checks and double checks with this observation process that's going to, again, not put it solely in the hands of a principal. Is there collegial support? Is there a mentor support? The issue of tenure, I would certainly recommend, and this will sound like I'm saying a swear word, that a teacher with concerns join the union so that they can have the union support on this. I would hate to think that, you know, it would be just so cut and dried that a principal had so much power to wield that he could say, I don't want you. We realize there are tenure issues and for staff that have not reached the tenure stage yet. But I would hope this doesn't happen in more than a very, very rare exception. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Majerus Collins.
Yeah, I just want to ask for a 5-minute recess before the next agenda item, since it seems like it's going to be a long one.
Okay. Sir, Ms. Ray.
Just to member physics point, I think another avenue that we're looking at that we haven't quite brought forward yet, but through the policy subcommittee, looking at those practices. And one thing that came up was what is legally required, and then what values do we want reflected in that policy handbook. And those differ sometimes with, you know, how above and beyond we want this district to go. And so as those conversations come forward, member Physic, I know you're a member of that subcommittee, but we'll definitely keep an eye to that as we move forward through the policy sections that deal with employment as well.
If there's no further discussion, we can take a quick break and we'll come back with agenda item number 8.
Megan?
Yes.
Sorry,
I
there
see
was
a
a-
hand now. Okay. Thank you. I
Can
didn't
we-
see that first.
I didn't either. Do you want to do it now or when we come back?
Linnea is still here. Kieran, are you still there? Allison, if you're okay, we'll follow up with you when everybody gets back. She can't reply. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. If everyone could turn their cameras on when they return so we know you're back, that would be helpful. Thank you. Jake, I think we lost Gemma somehow.
She may have stepped away. I know that she had some work that she needed to get done tonight, and we spoke to her. This cup was a gift from a colleague. Which paired with a whole separate thing.
And you're probably wearing khakis, right?
I am.
Yes.
I thought the State Farm connection was pretty good with the mask.
Jake, is your office warmer than your porch?
That's correct, Bruce. Yeah, it is. I did get myself a little heater though that I can operate in there, but I didn't have a gap in my day to make it to the other place where I can do meetings. So hopefully the weather doesn't catch me.
I got all day tomorrow, right?
No, we're not quite back yet. Watching we're not watching, waiting for a call on whether or not the state's going to close. I think that they might.
You said you're waiting on a call to see if the state's going to close?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to.
Okay. And then the question will be city, and then because my phone will actually already has kind of been blowing up about any local call. Because if the
Yeah,
state
Jake,
closes-
I just got the message, the county closed, so all the county offices are closed.
It's probably just a matter of time before I get the call that school buildings will be closed. But that's not official yet. Anybody listening? Do we have everyone back?
I'm not sure if Kiernan's back or not. Okay. Did we want to start right in with Allison since I kind of cut her off before? I apologize. Thank you.
Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you. No worries at all. I was here. So Allison Litton, LEA president, a few other roles as well, but in capacity tonight as the LEA president. So I just wanted to take a moment and first of all, just commend Ms. Brown on what an amazing job she's done since she's come to LPS. She's been so personable and just really easy to work with through some pretty tough situations. So I just publicly needed to acknowledge that. In another breath, I just really want to encourage the committee to continue to look at the recruitment and retention numbers, not only of what we've seen this year, but also what we're seeing at the end of years. I think this year looks a bit different, obviously, than any other year, and that's something that we need to pay mind to. the certified unit is currently getting ready for contract negotiations for the next 3 years. And we had put out a survey that just closed last, goodness, at the end of last week. And I spent the weekend kind of digging through, trying to look for some themes and just evaluating some information that had come to us. So just wanted to share a real brief peek of that. I don't quite have a large report to give you, but I'm happy to share information once I do. We sent the survey out to the 534 certified members within the LPS unit. That is social workers, nurses, anyone that falls under those categories, including classroom teachers, coaches, etc. We received 352 responses, which was a pretty good response rate, 65%. One of our questions was, have you considered leaving the district? If so, please share why. We had 100 individuals choose not to answer that question. We just, out of clarity, we did send this out through the LPS email. And at times we found that individuals are a little anxious about sharing super personal information through that platform, but we don't have information on non-members as far as contact information aside from that. So 100 individuals did not answer, that accounted for 28.4%. We had 27% answer no, that they had not considered leaving. And then that was 95 individuals, and then 157 individuals answered yes, that they had considered leaving. That makes up 44.6% of the respondents on the certified contract that chose to answer the survey. So just a few things that came up in comments. There was concern over unsustainable workload, lack of support, lack of communication, and lack of value or being respected. Another thing that came up was higher pay or compensation available in either other districts or in other areas that they could potentially, leave their current position for. And just to note, based on the data from the state, Lewiston is the 53rd in the state for a career earnings potential. So just something to keep in mind, as we progress with this. I honor the discussion that was had about substitutes, and they are a vital part of our work here in Lewiston, but please don't forget about the folks that are with you as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think we're done with agenda item number 8. Moving on to number 9, to receive an update regarding special education in Lewiston Public Schools. And Ms. Emery or Ms. Bushy and Superintendent Langley will present.
Yeah, I'm going to get us started. Kim and Beth, you're welcome to stick around if you want, but feel free to enjoy your evening if you wish. So what I was hoping to do for a format here, I have a few slides I'd like to just walk through, and then Pam has a number of slides she'd like to walk through and just articulate some things that we're learning, some things that we've been able to pull from the audit, and some work that's ongoing, and then open it up for questions. That'd be okay. One second here.
Pam, if you can hear me, I just moved you into as a panelist.
All right, so can everyone see? Oh, I can't see you because I'm presenting, but I didn't know if you all could see.
Yes, I believe we can, Jake.
Okay. All right, so I'll jump in here. Special education, just an overview with some considerations from me. Pam will dive a little deeper. last year, some history of special education audit was done. This work was completed from a distance due to COVID. The auditors did not have the opportunity to visit or see things in Lewiston in person. The LPS budget, asked Bobby for a number, for the current year is $23,992,384. The number of students in Lewiston with an individualized education plan or an IEP is currently 1,082. And the estimated number of scheduled IEP meetings annually around that number is over 1,200, almost 1,300. So some findings. When they did the audit, we were able to extrapolate some things. Again, Pam will dive deeper, but I wanted to do an overview here. The individualized education plans had too many supports in some reviews. The IEPs had some inconsistencies building to building. Lewiston Public Schools has approximately 70 staff, largely ed techs or one-to-ones, that could be reduced to create cost savings, according to the audit. The need for organizational structure to clarify roles and responsibilities, the need for consistency across the district as a whole, and the need for communication structure that is intentional and, again, structured. So we know some things for sure. We know these things to be true. Education is a gateway to higher quality of life. Parents and guardians and family members are passionate about their students' success. I would include staff in that. And while we plan for students, we have to plan for them in two areas simultaneously as it relates to special education. We have to plan for them from a student-centered approach. We also are required to plan for them with a data-supported approach that informs the choices we make about students' care and their education. We make team decisions based on what's best for each student in the least restrictive way. And the least restrictive conversation can get complicated in a hurry. And some of that goes back to Department of Education audit, which happened prior to the local audit, that spoke to some students that might be in a more restrictive environment than is required based on their need. Either way, there's a process established by law, and we had some clarification recently through a finding, and we are following that process from the finding. So we've done some digging and looking around, and I'm trying to figure out various pieces of this. When we look at the audit, we talk to staff, we've talked to different layers of staff, talked to some parents, and what I'm trying to sort out is this competing or competitive or conflicting information of what I'm hearing from internal folks, so Lewiston Public Schools staff, and also external folks. So this could be audits, DOE, parents, what have you. So internally, I'm hearing that we're short on staff and we need more staff. Externally in the audit, I'm hearing that we have too many staff. And I know that we want to continue to do the work we can to support our students. Internally, I hear things from some people that say we're under-identifying. We're denying special ed for some kids. Externally, including the Department of Education and their special education office, making statements in our prior audit that we over-identify kids. Internal, I'm hearing we need interventions. Externally, we're hearing that interventions are not special education, and there's a fine line between the two. If you're taking an intervention, are you growing enough at a pace that's fast enough, at a growth rate fast enough to not need special education? And that line can be pretty gray at times. Internally, we have strategies at times that are not documented. Externally, we're required to have purposeful strategies that are tried and measured with data to support decisions. Internally, we've had situations where some conclusions are made without process. And then externally, we have, again, between the various audits and other inputs, that we must use a process given by law. So we've asked questions, and when I keep referring to due process and law and things of that nature, I started asking for more information and diving deeper. We wanted to know more about the process for parents or staff. If they didn't agree with a team decision or wanted to jump to conclusions, what do you do? And Pam will talk more about the due process and the process for how people can work through things. And there can be different complaints. And I inserted this image here. It's been desensitized, so there's no student names or locations. But going back to 2015, and there may be one that's missing from this list, but the most comprehensive list I was able to dig up were 11 instances of complaints to the state of Maine that were formally filed. So in a 6-year window or a 5.5-year window, that many complaints, and you can see The result is it varies. So you can see the first one is no result yet. It's open, it's happening. The second one, district complied and the matter was closed. The third one, district complied and additional complaint is open. The next three are in favor of complainant. That would be whoever put forth the complaint. They were found to be in favor. When that happens, we have corrective actions that we take as a district. I don't know the history of all these individual ones, but I know that when we're found, the complainant is found to be in favor of their request, that we have to take corrective measures. Number 7 was withdrawn for some reason. Again, I don't have that detail. The 8th was in favor of the complainant. Number 9 was withdrawn. 10 was in favor of the district with no violations found. And 11 was in favor of the complainant. So just to dive in a little deeper, I'm going to ask Pam to jump onto the screen. I'm going to switch to her presentation. Part of what I want to share is as I dive deeper into special education, different audits, our structures, our protocols, one of the things that I have decided that I need to do as a superintendent, I need to clarify roles and responsibilities for people. There's some definite crossover. People don't know who's in charge of what things at times, and we need to clarify that as a district so that there's no, well, he said, she said, that kind of stuff. And I'm making the best decision I can with the directive I got from this person, when that may not be the person that is really in a chain of command, if you will, or hierarchy that is familiar with the law. The other thing I want to add is we have amazing staff doing amazing things, but our special education staff are being asked to do things that our other staff are not asked to do. Their workload is bigger. Their tasks are more abundant. And so you'll see some things that as we come through the budget season, we talk about planning for our most vulnerable and things of that nature, which are some of the goals this year. We need to continue to work at these things. The other piece that I want to bring up before Pam jumps in is the most important thing that we can do, in my opinion, as superintendent, is to focus on tier 1 instruction so that students don't have to go into a referral process and get identified incorrectly because their classroom instruction is as good as it can be. And that varies. There's additional supports, interventions, all of these things. But the best experience students will have is that great classroom that is set up well, that uses good instruction. And I'm not pointing fingers. I think our staff do an amazing job. I just know there's areas for growth there. Pam, I'm going to put up your slideshow if you want to jump in and walk us through some of the additional components at a greater depth. And then afterwards, we'll open it up for questions. 1 second.
Pam, you're on mute.
Apparently nobody can hear me. I was just starting by thanking everyone for allowing me to come and present to this team. It has been something that I've really wanted to be able to do, to give you a true overview of what special ed does look like. I wanted to start with the presentation to just so you get a understanding of what it actually looks like. And then we can talk about the different pieces that Jake kind of ran through for us. One of the things in Lewiston Public Schools, this is our mission for special ed. This is on our website that we've generated. This is on our Twitter page. But at LPS, special education uses highly specialized instruction along with evidence-based curriculum addressing the academic, functional, social, emotional needs of students to foster independence. This is our goal. Everything we do is based on getting a student to reach independence to their capacity. The structure of special ed, and special ed is ginormous. It is a very large department. And so at the top is the director. Below the director is the assistant director and the district clinical supervisor. They each have very specific roles on what they are looking at. The assistant director meets weekly with the supervisors, and she provides guidance and feedback to everything that they're doing. The supervisors are then below. They are responsible to oversee special ed within the school themselves. They are the evaluators of all special ed staff within their buildings. The director, that's me, I provide weekly supervision to the BCBAs as well as the specialists. The BCBAs then oversee the RISE program as well as FLS. All of these programs I will go into detail as we progress through the slides. The district clinical supervisor does oversee the behavioral programs that we have within our district. So those are our self-contained programs, those are our day treatment programs. New as of last year, we had a special ed clinician supervisor, and she does oversee some of the clinicians as well. And so really there's the director and the 2 assistants who then oversee all the programs. And so this is really the framework of what special ed looks like at this time. Special education in an overview. We have 1,082 students in special education at this time. This number unfortunately changes daily. So this is the number that I got on 1/29 when I pulled the numbers together. LHS has 254, LMS 156, Montello 89, Connors 114, McMahon 143, Geiger 105, Farwell is 105, and at this time we do have 116 students who are outplaced. IEP meetings, I put this in the wrong order. IEP meetings, I wanted this in a different spot. The reasons that we hold IEP meetings is generally for an initial referral. We will determine whether or not we feel a student will qualify for special education. We have meetings to review new IEPs. We have meetings to talk about transfer students. If a student, and this happens pretty frequently in our district, if a student goes from Connors to McMahon, that's not considered a transfer meeting, but we have determined as a district best practice would be we will hold a meeting. It's called a program review, but we want to ensure that we're implementing the IEP in the way it was intended. We do have the annual meetings, the tri-annual meeting, the annual, obviously it's annual, but every 3 years we need to review a student's IEP and do additional testing to ensure that they still qualify or whether or not new identification. So we will do additional testing. Parent requests, parent can request a meeting, and this truly is about after that annual meeting, is there something going on that's different from what happened at the annual? Or did that student start decompensating? Or this happens too, the student is doing amazing and we want to come back as a team and maybe tweak some of the things that we're doing. Manifestation meeting. This is if a student is disciplined, and a student being disciplined for over 10 days, we want to come together as a team and talk about what can we do differently to ensure the student can stay in school, and did we implement the IEP appropriately? And if so, they need to be back in school. So there's just a lot of questions that we have that manifestation meeting for, but it really is about making sure that that student stays in school. And then the program review, and that really is talking about everything that we do in the IEP meeting, in the IEP itself. One of the things I just wanted to note, and as Jake referenced before, our staff are amazing and they're doing great, amazing thing. They make special ed. The great things about special ed, that's because of the amazing staff that we have. I wanted to make sure that we were looking 3 different areas because I didn't think just looking at this year's numbers would give you a kind of insight of what has happened in special ed. I also didn't think last year's numbers would be giving you a clear understanding of how much the staff are attending meetings or making sure that they're meeting with families, making sure that they're addressing the concerns on the IEPs. So I went back to 2018-19 school year, which we did not have the COVID, we did not have the shutdown. And then I did this year. So in 2018, and generally, right, IEP meetings are done annually. That means it's a one-time a year unless things are coming up. So these numbers should be closer to the amount of special ed students we have in those buildings. And you can see pretty clearly that we're doubling the numbers of IEP meetings that we're having for our students to ensure that we're truly meeting their needs. We're responding to parent requests. We're doing all of these things. at a great rate. The 2020, 2021 year-to-date meetings, that's just now. So they're already beyond what they have for special ed students, and we still have the remainder of the year to go. So this truly is a heavy lift for our staff to be ensuring that they're coming together as a team, meeting with parents, talking about the IEP and implementing something that the student truly needs to be successful. Disability categories, I wanted to make sure that you had a sense of this as well. ASD, or the autism spectrum disorder, we do have 97 students who are identified in that category. ED, and I think that has been the one that has been talked about a little bit in the audit, that we're over identifying students with this. And certainly at a later date, we could go into greater detail. I have a lovely presentation for all of you about that specific identification, but there's 144 there. OHI, generally you'll see anxiety, ADHD for that category, 207. Speech and language impairment is 131. This identification can be a standalone. SLD, specific learning disability, 244. Intellectual disabilities, 72. Multiple disabilities. And this also was one that we have been, from DOE as well as our audit, that we are over identifying students with multiple disabilities. We really should be using this sparingly, and it's when a student's identification is so dramatically different that we have to make sure we identify 2 or 3 different disabilities. Orthopedic impediment is 1, hearing impairment is 4, traumatic brain injury 2, developmental disability is 2, and I have to put a caveat there. We should not, in Lewiston Public Schools, have a developmental disability as at the age of 5, it changes into a new disability, so that will be fixed. But since it was there, it's there right now. Supports and intervention, and this again is what Jake talked about earlier. In general ed, prior to going to special ed, we really need to be looking at RTI and what are those RTI interventions. And we do have some great models in some of our elementary schools. I know the higher grade levels are really working hard at implementing those interventions, but a lot of it is that tier 1 intervention that we really need to be focused in on. I know last year with my team, we went around and doing presentations on RTI referrals and what that looks like. And the response from the teams were it was amazing, because they just wanted to gather more information on what interventions could they do for their students. And the more that we can do that, I think the better we're going to be prepared for the students coming into our classrooms. Tier 2 and 3 interventions done in small group, that also goes into, it can be in the classroom, it can be pulled out, it can be individually based, but it truly is about the students. Then we go to special ed. The referral process for special education. At the front of everything, it is about the student needs and what is in the best interest of that student. When we go to the table, we really want to know, what have they had for interventions? And that's what we're looking for. What did they have in RTI? When we talk about RTI, it really is a time frame that we're looking for amount of time to see, was there any growth? If they didn't have any growth, we're more likely to go to a referral. But if there has been growth, there has been some progression, we may wait an additional period of time, but we truly need to see that they participated in an RTI. So a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks in each area that is identified. So if they're in math, they're doing all the things that they need to do, they've had interventions, they're doing okay. Where they're struggling in literacy, we've now implemented literacy. That doesn't mean when they're going to go to an IEP or a referral for math. So we just need to make sure that we're looking at each category that there's a struggle in. If the team is feeling that a student is not progressing in the special education supervisor for the building will be called to discuss options. And this is during the 6 to 8 week window. We want to ensure that we're meeting them early on, provide instruction, collaborate to ensure that they get what they're needing. If the student continues to not show any progress, a referral will be made. It is submitted to the special ed supervisor. The special ed supervisor will ensure that all the data is there. And within 15 days from receiving it in hand, and this is all like legally obligated, within 15 days, school days, we need to sit down with the family and the IEP team to talk about whether or not we feel this is an appropriate referral. If at that meeting, whoops, where'd it go? If at that meeting as a team, we say, we believe there's enough information, we need to go further with this, we will order testing and evaluations, which we have 45 days to complete. And really that is about observations that we want to happen for the student. We want file reviews. We want interviews with the parent. We want interviews with the child. We want a robust wealth of knowledge of that student. So it's not a one-time snapshot of the student. It is looking at the entire picture. Once the evaluation has been completed, the team comes back and they review. There are 3 things you need in order to qualify for special ed, and it can't be one or the other. The diagnosis, there needs to be a diagnosis that a student receives. From that, we talk about, is there adverse impact on the educational environment? So in school, in remote instruction, that's included because it's our environment, our educational environment. Is there an adverse impact? And here's the doozy. Do they need specially designed instruction in order to access their learning? If the answer is no to any of those questions, they do not qualify for special ed. If we say yes to all those components, the team has 30 days to create an initial IEP. In order for us to then implement that, that parent needs to then sign saying, yes, I give you permission to implement the IEP. Continuation. Members of the IEP team. The critical members of the IEP team are, or the legally required members are, the parent. They are critical. They must be at the table. They know their child the best. We need a special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, and we need an administrator. Those are the required members of the IEP team. They will absolutely be invited to that meeting. We certainly have other members who want to come to the table, and for the most part, we invite all members who have a vested interest. So if you're if you're the psychologist doing the evaluation, of course, we're going to invite the evaluator to the table to review the information that they have. But the 4 members are the critical members of the IEP team and other members who are working with the student. The IEP team meets to discuss the individual needs of the students based on the parameters of those legal guidelines. So the 3 things that I mentioned before, a diagnosis, an adverse impact, and specially designed instruction. And that's the key. If we do not need specially designed instruction by a special ed teacher, you do not qualify for special education. The team always looks for consensus. So we want to have a robust dialogue of what do we think is the best interest of the student in those parameters. We try to come up all agreeing. If we don't agree, the school administrative unit does make that final determination. One of the things that's important to understand, and you can move on to the next one, I don't need the slide to say it, is that if an IEP team makes a decision, it's not my role, it's not Jake's role, it's not Karen's role, it's no one's role to overturn the decision of an IEP team. That's not good practice. That should never happen. The way to go about the concerns of an IEP decision is going to due process. And that's what Jake talked about before. Due process is your venue to say, I really don't agree with one of the things that's happened. Can we have a conversation about this? And really, it's about having those intentional conversations as a team. And due process is not necessarily a bad thing. We're talking about, let's say, a disagreement in our stance. Most of the time, the school is falling based on legal responsibilities, and the parents are, of course, talking about the best interest of their child. So certainly, if we go to mediation, we have those conversations and ensure that we're doing what is best by the child and the family as well. FAPE and LRE. The legal concept of FAPE is a free and appropriate public education. So that is what we're striving for. We want to ensure that we are doing this for all of our students. Also, we are responsible to have a student in the least restrictive environment. That least restrictive environment, the purpose of it is to ensure that a student is with their typically developing peers. That is our plate. That is why we go to the table saying what our main focus is to ensure that the student is in the least restrictive environment. I just over here put our mission again, that really our goal is to address the academic, functional, social, emotional needs of our students to ensure and foster independence. IEP development. An IEP is developed based on the individual needs of a student. It should be aligned to the identification the student is qualified under. IEP goals are based on the disability. So an example, if a student has a disability in math, they do not require SDI in reading. And so really their IEP should be written specifically for math. And this is just to note, the DOE provides us, Maine DOE, provides us with direction and training on how IEPs are written. And also, we must stay within the parameters of the law. And so I know Jake mentioned we did have our audit, which they reviewed over 100 IEPs. They came back with things that we needed to tweak. We've done training on those different methods, but certainly that is something that we need to keep in mind when we're moving forward on what those IEPs look like.
Pam, you're referencing the Department of Education audit.
Department of Education, yes. IEP meeting protocol. So this is what we do when we're writing up our IEP. We have the evaluation, we have the disability, we look at the needs of that student, we then create some goals, we talk about what those services are going to look like, and whether or not there's going to be accommodations that we then can put into that IEP. These all, whoops. I don't know what that bubble said. They all lead to specially designed instruction and access to the student's least restrictive environment. This, and I was going to say at the beginning, I wasn't going to go through all of these thoroughly, but it seems like that's exactly what I'm doing. I apologize for that. So example of identifying a student. And so this was just one I kind of put up there, the difference between a learning difficulty versus a learning disability. And so there are differences in that. A general learning difficulty is not going to be considered, they may not require specially designed instruction, but they may require RTI and have differentiation. They have a low IQ, but there's not a deficit. There's no strengths and weaknesses. On the flip side, a specific learning disability, they may require special ed. And I'm not saying they should require special ed, because some students may only require an accommodation and not specially designed instruction. And so some of the things that are in this category are perceptual disabilities, brain injury, dyslexia, developmental aphasia. These are things that we would be looking at when we're looking at a specific learning disability. So the next slides are really, this is what we have within special ed within our school department. Resource room is generally a pull-out service when we're providing students with specially designed instruction. We have 309 students that participate in the resource room at this time. They include math, reading, writing, executive functioning, and social skills development, so they can do pull-out to resource room to receive this. Goals for specially designed instruction are developed according to the student's disability and individual needs. Another piece is we do have 481 students that are in the general education or just receive speech and language services. And earlier I said speech and language can be a standalone. That is the only related service that they can just have speech, and that is permissible by the law. Students in the general ed classes only receive their specially designed instruction through embedded instruction in the classroom from ed techs overseen by the special ed teacher or from special education co-teachers. Speech and language services pull students from the gen ed classes for their sessions, or they may push into the classroom. We have a robust, and Jake mentioned this, apparently that's my word of the day, is robust. We have many specialized programs in our district, and it's something that we really should be proud about and celebrated. I don't think we do enough praising some of the amazing work that our teams do, and this is something that we really should be proud of. We have 235 students in our district who are in highly specialized programs. These are students who are not outplaced. They are students who have significant needs that have very individualized programs. There's a very concrete procedure on how these students attend these programs or how they go into the programs. We have a protocol on a more restrictive environment that staff or the supervisors are required to follow to ensure that we're keeping our students in the least restrictive environment. Each program has a program handbook that articulates the structure, the purpose, roles, and responsibilities of these programs. We do make it a point of reviewing them annually with staff, and we do ask for their input on whether or not we should tweak it, and then we make those updates annually.
I just want to add in that these particular programs, they really are gems. They're nested in our community. We have students that have lots of success stories out of them. We have people as far away as Connecticut that have looked at it and discussed our programming and the way we go through things. And so these things are really making a difference for our kids. I'd also add that before these programs were built within and inclusion driven in our schools, these students would be looking at that situation where they might not be able to go to school in Lewiston because we couldn't provide the service. So we've really grown in this area.
And so each of those programs, I do have a little snapshot just so you can get a sense of who is in the different programs. The profile of the students in the functional life skills program can range, but it includes a student with an intellectual disability, a student who has been diagnosed with the autism spectrum disorder, and other cognitive impairments. Generally, the IQ is going to be below 70, and they really have a low adaptive scale. Generally, we're looking at below 60, but we certainly have students who have slightly higher than that. We do have this K-12, and this has been really a focus. Our 7 through 12 this year is what we've been highlighting and really making gains there. That too is something we should be doing cartwheels about. I did a cartwheel yesterday. We have 86 students district-wide for this program. We have classrooms, and you'll see this on a different slide, but it's important to understand that Farwell is our district FLS school. So any student who requires the use of a separate setting or has the ability, their IQ is so low, they need the additional support, they are our district school. So all of our elementary students would go to Farwell. There is a program at middle school and high school. The FLS team provides, whoopsies. It provides highly structured instruction addressing academic, functional, social, emotional needs. To realize this, the FLS team engages family actively in educational planning and supports strong school, family, community connections. The team supports students across all grade levels and engages transition planning as the students go up to high school. So one of the things I enjoy, it's going to be shocking, are the students. And I know someone said that earlier, why we stay in our positions or why we stay at Lewiston schools. And the next one is each program I have a story for success and some of the things that students have been able to do. And I just want you to take the opportunity right now, if you read this, and it's just the story of a young man who's kind of started within our programs, really worked through the program, did amazing things, and now kind of started on his adult life. But with all the hard work of I'm going to cry, our staff at the high school, who's phenomenal, who designed a new program called Bridges. They designed it a couple of years ago, and each year they're just making additional gains to ensure the success of our students as they transition into adulthood. It's pretty remarkable to see it. I know right now COVID is happening, but just the opportunity to see the work that the staff members and these students, really the students, has been amazing to witness. So this is, yeah, it's amazing to witness. So if you have time to read that. Our other program is the RISE program, and this is Reaching Independence Through Systematic Education. And this is truly those students who require an applied behavior analytic program. I know a lot of people say it's your autism program. I frown against saying that because it really is, you have to have a unique profile. It doesn't matter what your diagnosis is. It truly is, what do you need to be successful? And we're going to look at that. So it could be another pervasive developmental disorder, and we would still talk about the appropriateness of the program. K-12, we do have 74 students within our programs. We have a program at Geiger, Farwell, Lewiston Middle, and Lewiston High School. The program does have a very high staff to student ratio to ensure inclusion and success. Due to the complex profiles, these students typically will have a one-to-one staff member. So that's 74 right there, one-to-ones. 74, they'll have a one-to-one, or they will have one staff to two students. And our goal is to always, and we do have a nice protocol on how to do this, but how to step away from having a one-to-one or a two-to-one, but it's based on the presentation of the student and what that student needs to be successful. Some students will require a one-to-one as they go through their whole academic career. And so every 2 weeks we have a dialogue about, okay, what do we think they need right now? And then we pull back, and then we gather evidence and data to support whether or not they need it continuously. The RISE program is an ABA multidisciplinary, evidence-based, and highly individualized program of Lewiston Public Schools. This program utilizes a multidisciplinary team, which means that we all talk as a team. So we have our BCBA, our speech therapist, our OT, our teacher, our BHPs, all are part of a unique team that is focused on meeting the needs of our students. Our goal is always inclusion with everything we do. There's a wonderful report. I know Jake's like, stop talking. We have a wonderful report that we did a 2-year study on the students and the outcomes of this program. It was presented in France. again, we've just done some great stuff. And then we do have another report that we just did about right now during COVID and what the outcomes have been for some of our students. And here's another success story for our student. This one's a good one. They're all good.
This one student is in college, correct?
Mm-hmm. And so the one that he just went through is a link. And so within the link are a couple more stories of the students within the programs.
And we'll share this out to everyone so they can look through those stories.
Whoops. One more, that one. Self-contained and day treatment. McMahon has our district day treatment, so any student in elementary school would be able to attend that program. 9-12, we have the ESP program, which is the emotional support program. We service 75 students in these programs, as well as we have self-contained behavior programs that are at Connors, McMahon, and Geiger. And then currently in the planning for day treatment 7 through 8. Day treatment and self-contained behaviors provide direct instruction for students with moderate to severe emotional and behavioral disabilities in order to enable them to participate in the public school setting, with inclusion in general ed to the maximum extent possible. The purpose of these programs is to provide a supportive setting within the public school, which can address the learning, behavioral, and emotional needs of the students who are at risk of failing in the general ed. Again, a success story. And this is a very good success story. This was a student who was struggling immensely at one of the area schools. We did a lot of observations, tried to provide feedback to the staff on how they could implement a plan. We then had him attend the McMahon Day Treatment Program, and he flourished. He learned new skills. He took everything in. He was able to articulate what was happening, and he actually was able to transition successfully and actually is in the school participating in the general ed classes fully. So it was amazing to watch. Staffing. Internally, we are saying we are understaffed, as we've all heard this over and over again. I know in Kim's presentation earlier, just to say the point out loud, we have 70 openings in our special ed department. These are being predominantly filled by substitutes to ensure that the students are accessing the IEPs. It is important to understand that because of COVID, things are looking dramatically different on how we are providing the support for our students. So someone who may require a one-to-one at all times of the day during COVID, we can use one staff member to do A day and B day. So it's going to look dramatically different. But if we were to open fully, we would require all of these things for them to be successful. The staff says we're overstaffed. And I just have to be clear about when the audit happened, they looked at 9 IEPs, and those were 9 IEPs that were randomly selected in each specific program. And the reason I wanted them to be able to look at the different programs is that they could see the differences of programming that were given to each of our students. So I just need you to keep that in the back of your head when we're talking about it. Not negating any of the outcomes, but just the snapshot that they were looking at. We do have 1,082 students. So that 9 IEPs is not representative of the true needs of what the special ed department needs are. This is a breakup of our staffing. And so I just want to point you to the BHPs. The BHPs, we do have 128 BHPs. And as we just talked about, all of our specialized programs have BHPs. And the rationale behind this is it is a specialized program and we require them to do extra responsibilities, and having them become BHPs really did allow them to have additional pay to support them doing the work that they were doing within these programs. So the program itself is heavily staffed based on the needs of those students to ensure that we can successfully keep them in Lewiston Public Schools, as well as include them as much as we can. Students not getting services on an IEP, there are related services that a student is obligated to receive if they were required to access their IEP in the educational environment. So that is occupational therapy, physical therapy, and counseling. Speech, as I said before, is a standalone, so they can receive that. Over 2 years, we have been searching for a speech therapist for 3 schools. LMS and LHS are considered one school in my mind, but we've been looking for a speech therapist there, as well as Montello. Because of that, and we kept track of each session, we explored the possibility, we researched, we went nationally exploring the possibility of what can we do, who can we bring into the schools to provide those services. I know at this time we do have presence learning. There was a hiccup in the start of that based on IT and what the parameters were that. As I know this committee is well aware of the parameters of YouTube and why we couldn't do YouTube, which is why we couldn't do presence learning. So all of the services, we have documentation of all the services that are provided, all of the services that are offered to our students, and whether or not they have been completed. And I know Jake has a wonderful document that I generated to demonstrate how much services a student in LPS is truly getting, especially right now due to COVID. And it shows all the amazing work that our staff have been doing throughout this time. But that's the little caveat of the speech services.
Yeah, it's a spreadsheet that's quite thick.
In a world of all data, I have a lot of data. Professional development, and I know this has been something, and it's interesting that this is my passion for all of our staff. I want our staff to get professional development. Each year I've put in my budget for some phenomenal PD that they could actually go away for. In my presentations, for the last 2 years, I have a PD plan, which highlights all the different things that I intend to train my staff on. Most of these things, not most, all, have been developed based on the things that my team and I have witnessed have been struggles for our teams that I know that they need instruction on, and from the exit surveys that they've said, these are the things we want training on. And so for the past 2 years, that has been something I've presented. Unfortunately, there are obstacles based on time, competing interests, and this is not something that we've been able to complete. I would love solutions, ways to be able to accomplish it, but I too believe wholeheartedly in PD for our teams. Just a side note, PD for those specialized programs, once a month for 3 hours. They do have training because it truly is specialized. My desire would be to do this for all of our special ed staff, actually even general ed staff. Day treatment and self-contained does have a 40-minute bi-weekly with the Center for Children with Special Needs. as well as having consult monthly. The structure of the program allows for, and this is for RISE and FLS, allows for our BCBAs, clinicians, case managers, and day treatment to do on the floor training. They check on fidelity to ensure that they're implementing what they need to be implementing. The special ed supervisors are also obligated or responsible to provide building-based training for their trainings. We just did a DOE written notice training with our supervisors, and the ask of them was to then provide that training to their team members. And this is what our BCBAs are doing after the training that they're doing for the RISE and FLS teams. They are asking for their input, they're asking for their interest, they're asking for suggestions on improvements. And this just gives you a synopsis of what they've been able to do. And now we're going back to Blake for a second.
Okay.
I forgot to mention that.
Superintendent, you're on mute still.
Thank you. Sorry. So from a tiered response perspective, some things I'd like to see us commit to over the next 6 is to conduct an IEP audit, something that looks at more than a handful of IEPs to make sure that we are consistently planning, meeting the kids' needs, and successfully able to plan out the supports we need and resources we need. I'd like to do order a special education curriculum audit to ensure that our our curriculum work is aligned to the things that we stand for as a district. I want to continue to review findings, create action steps, monitor and refine once those audits are completed, and they will be requested in the budget process. I want to identify, articulate, and implement different structures, roles, responsibilities, and hierarchy, as I mentioned earlier. These really need to be clarified. Right now, they are not clear. Karen and I interviewed somewhere around 30 different staff, and this is a consistent answer that we found, that we need to clarify roles and who has what directives and who needs to carry those out. So with that, create and implement a communication plan that goes from the director of special education to building leaders, supervisors, and back, so there's good communication. And this will be done deliberately through scheduled meetings, oversight, and a shift in process. Continue to gather resource, identify process for instruction to support students, and of course their varying needs, and including the work that has begun around dyslexia. Year 1, so moving out of the 6-month window, develop a curriculum based on the audit findings, using staff input and other input. Begin training staff with decided curriculum and implement. I think one of the things we forget to do sometimes in the district is we have a great idea and we don't pause to think about what it takes to carry that idea out. So I want to make sure that we do that deliberately. And then develop metrics in that process to measure implementation. And begin training on the IEP plan for consistency, and look for cost savings and program improvement. And then we want to engage staff with Tier 1 instruction, of course, as I mentioned before, using the best Tier 1 strategies we can, which is another layer of professional development that I think staff would be receptive to. Some items in Year 2, communication routines should be in full cycle, and we should be able to look at those and see that we're meeting the expectations that we've set forth, and reflect and refine with a 360-degree input model, and monitor data and metrics from implementation to see where we need to make adjustments. And again, look for cost savings and programmatic improvement. And I want to throw it back to you now to see if there are any questions that you have in and around special education. We'll do our very best to answer them. That was a lot of information.
And then my slide was prettier for the end, Jake.
Mr. Physick.
Yeah, I actually have a bunch of questions, so sorry guys if I monopolize time. And two, once I'm done hearing all the responses, I'm going to hop off to get to work. I just want to highlight the roles of special educators, the three roles they serve as a teacher, case manager, and also a supervisor of ed techs. My question's going to revolve around curriculum, procedures, professional development, and I think it kind of alluded to a little bit is communication plan. As far as curriculum goes, I know a couple of years ago there were complaints at the school that I was in the classroom with, where there weren't enough materials. The kits were incomplete. I was helping out a classroom Xerox tons of other materials because there's no curriculum. And then kind of 3 years later, we're kind of still at this. Now for the question, well, next school year, will special ed have a curriculum in it? And if they're not going to, are they going to have at least complete materials until the plan is underway or the curriculum audit is done?
And so I can answer a couple of those items. So in special education, there's two folds to that. And so two of the curriculums that we use pretty in all of the buildings, and everyone has been received this. We have Linda Moodbell as well as Number Worlds. Number Worlds, we did purchase this curriculum for math that we did invite all teachers over to review and let me know whether or not they felt that it was important or useful or valuable. And only after that did we determine that we were going to use it. In saying that, not all special ed curriculum is going to be identical because it is about the individual needs of the students. And I thought, Megan, you were telling me I was on mute. So we do have a lot of curriculum. And I know one of the things that I did ask for last year is input from all of our special ed staff and supervisors to tell me exactly what you're saying. Which one do you feel that is working for our students? Which ones do you feel that you need more training in? Which one do you feel that you don't need anything and you can also train your peers? So those were all the questions I had been asking because I absolutely want to ensure that the students and the teachers have what they need to provide what they need to the students. And so I know this year, as well as the end of last year, I have been receiving multiple requests for different curriculums, but again, a lot of them are not evidence-based that they were requesting. And so then I push it back and I ask, okay, what do you have for evidence for this? Why do you want this specific one? And what can we do to ensure that we're using what is the best for the students? We just purchased something over at LMS. Again, I want the staff to, and calling it a pilot because I want the staff to look at it, research it, tell me, yes, this works for our students, or no, it doesn't work for the student. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. But I truly need it to be that curriculum. And again, it's going to be based on those students' needs. So like our RISE program, we use Edmark more frequently than we have previously. And so this is like 3 years ago. And we realized that it truly works for a lot of students based on their presentation. So now we've started purchasing it for varying schools. We now have Spire training that I've been trying for the last year to get our teachers into that training to ensure that they can get the training that they need to be implementing it. That keeps getting packed, but I'm then purchasing the curriculum to ensure that they can implement what they're being trained in. So absolutely, our teachers need what they need and to ensure that our students are receiving what they need as well. So I agree with you on that.
Okay. So I just want to highlight, I don't think it was anything of, I think it was more of that, again, that they're getting incomplete kits or part of the Spire kit that they might have dug out that someone had thrown away, that they have to Xerox it. So I think it was more of lack of materials. That was the case. As far as professional development goes, I know from even talking to general ed teachers that a lot of the PD that's done on the Wednesdays after schools are geared more towards general ed teachers. And the special ed teachers are sitting there with tons of IEPs, ton of written notices to get done. And they're sitting through stuff that's not, a lot of times, not even applicable to them, or they've already had some of the training. So how do we ensure confidence? Again, these are issues that had come up 3 years ago, and then 3 years later, we're still kind of at this point. How do we ensure our special ed teachers that they're going to get the PD that they need? And let me reference the fact, I haven't heard from teachers from the RISE program or any other programs. More of the complaints I get that come from teachers and stuff that I've seen is more from the elementary schools. And coincidentally enough, it keeps coming from the same elementary schools. So I just want to know how do we instill confidence that this is definitely a new turning point in the special ed program after we've had such troubles in this area.
And do you want me to answer it?
Yes, please.
Jose, do you want to?
Well, I guess I would just say to the PD piece, I think it's a bigger picture than just special ed. We definitely know that this is an area that we can improve in, and having those plans that, as Pam's referring to, that are specific to special ed. But we also battle this time factor where there are trainings that special ed teachers need to be with other staff for specific training. And we need to do a better job of organizing our time and making sure that we're using the time and balancing it with what teachers are asking for, which all of you have heard, and we've discussed over and over again about time to do the things they feel that they need to do. And that's totally reasonable and acceptable. So we do have this time factor. Pam referenced her PD plan and her training and things that go along with that. And her, to her point, much of that didn't happen because we had other priorities or we had things that were taking time, that we were using the time for that were not specific to special ed. So Elgin, I think the plan and having us all on the same terms of this is what the time's going to be used for. And there will be times where special ed teachers don't get the same training that general ed and vice versa. And we just have to be mindful of that and recognize that that is going to happen, and not have this expectation that they're going to get everything that general ed teachers are expected to get in addition to what special ed trainings they need as well.
I feel like I'm hearing a few things. One is time. One is we need to align our professional development better. And I also want to just make note that we also have some things that are mandatory. I know that when I personally went through the therapeutic crisis intervention training, it was required of me. I had to do it. It was required by rule. It was, I don't know, the 15th or so time that I took the same training with light modifications to it. And it was just required. So we have those conundrums too. But I think we can get better at alignment for sure.
Can I finish? So again, getting aligned together. Again, you already outlined a communication plan. I know traditionally the communication among the special ed teachers confused because it goes from your office all the way down to the principals, and it does go from the principals to the coaches. And by the time it goes to about 3,000 people, being facetious, the meaning or the message gets changed, like the exercise you did, like we would do back in first and second grade. And so it moves to my next point as far as report cards go. So my understanding is that the teachers, special ed teachers, make comments on the IEPs, but then they have to duplicate work to put on an actual report card. And then since the kids aren't at grade level, they're at a 1. And then that is not only demoralizing for the kid, but a lot of times there's a lot of confusion with the parents of the what the kid's actually doing in terms of that they're special ed trying to get that piece. So is there a way to not duplicate work? And two, is there a way to better communicate parents that even though their kid is not at grade level, they're in special ed and they're trying to get to grade level?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I frame that to make sure I have the right concept here. I'll use myself as an example. I have an IEP. I'm working towards my growth. The teachers are helping me, especially design instruction, what have you. And I'm actually doing okay. And then I get a report card that's grade level standards and I'm getting nothing but ones because I'm not at that level. I never was. And I have an IEP that says that I'm not. I'm making growth, but it's not showing up on my report card. And then when I get my report card, it looks like I'm failing across the board, but the report card doesn't reflect my IEP. Is that more or less the concept?
Yes, and from a teacher standpoint, what like if it's already on the IEP, why do that to go again and put it back on the report card? It's almost like we're duplicating work. I mean, is there a way to streamline that process? I mean, especially too, special ed teachers are, they got the case manager, the supervising ed techs, people describe a teacher workload this year. This is what special ed is on a daily basis before COVID for special ed teachers. So I'm asking, is there a way to kind of streamline that process?
That one I want to look into a little deeper. I feel like that one's come up before.
And a lot of this is based on the PBL work that was done prior to, and a lot of committee meetings, and that was the outcome. I know a piece was that if a special ed teacher does not do more than 50% of the coursework, that they would not have to then enter it on the report card. And so they would just be responding on the standards itself. But the intent was that they would be collaborating with the general ed teacher and they would be responsible for inputting that grade into the report card. It becomes different when we're talking about, and I don't know what teacher they are. If they're in a self-contained classroom or if they're in a day treatment program or a RISE program, that does look slightly different because they are 100% responsible for that student. And so there is that double duty as we're looking at it. They're doing both parts. But generally they will say, see additional attachment, which is then your IEP. So I know that's just a piece of that.
Okay, just a couple more questions and I'm done. If an IEP agrees on something, who makes the deciding factor on, let's just say the special ed supervisor disagrees with the rest of the IEP team? Who's the deciding tie factor?
If they do not reach consensus, the supervisor is the person who makes the final decision.
Okay. And
that's illegal. Generally, we wouldn't do that unless we're violating a legal venue or it's something that we shouldn't be doing at that time. So how I said they need those 3 prongs in order to qualify. So if everyone agrees a student qualifies, even knowing there's no adverse impact or they're not specially designed instruction, everyone's saying they should get it. Well, they really don't qualify. So that person, the supervisor, would say, no, I'm making this final decision because none of this actually meets the criteria to be in special ed.
Okay, and just 2 more questions. How do you supervise your staff people? Like how do you supervise like your special ed supervisors? The reason I'm asking is because again, certain schools is like are the concept schools the last couple of years that I would hear complaints about, and there's certain schools that I would not hear complaints about. One of them, I'm not going to name names, but again, that person who's a special ed supervisor had taught special ed for years, and so I think with some of this latest is that some of the special ed supervisors, they know the law, but again, when it comes to a general application of putting into process, I think that there's an issue. So how do you supervise them?
And so we do meet every other week to review all different aspects of what's going on in special ed. We then talk about, well, if there's different changes in the laws, things like that. Every week there is supervision that happens. My assistant does participate in that. We do running records. So if there's an issue, I'm responding to every issue that comes up current time. So if someone puts it in the supervision notes, I'm able to respond to it. We are pulling over 100 IEPs a week to look at what's going on in IEPs and sitting and having a dialogue with the supervisors. I think there's this misconception that things are going to change 100% of the time, like immediately. There is a lot of work to be done, and people are willingly going to the table to try to affect changes. So I know there's this misconception that things aren't happening, but there's a lot of work being done to ensure that people are in compliance with the law.
Can I also add that we're dangerously close, I think, to what's considered a personnel matter. And I guess I don't want to leave people unfulfilled with their questions and answers, but also that there may have been steps taken in different arenas that are not public because they're protected as personnel matters.
Okay, last question. So Adori is the program that you use for logging in IEPs and things as such. And I'm just curious, after due to COVID, where the workload's even more heavy, I was understanding that they basically took away the cut and paste option off the IEPs, which would allow people just to kind of transfer IEPs. And I know there was a concern that IEPs were not written to the standard that they should be. I'm just curious, kind of why now, and also too, if IEPs weren't written to the standard, then why are the supervisors not reviewing the IEPs as they should? And I know an instance that someone had shared with me that sometimes that they would purposely write stuff on the IEP and that the special ed supervisor would go unnoticed because special ed supervisor wasn't reviewing the IEP. So I'm curious why now with the Adori, is that something that can be moved until after the school year? And number two is, are the special ed supervisors required to review every IEP that's written by the people that are under them?
And so their new name is EDMS. And unfortunately, many case managers actually use the cloning app. It's not an app, but the cloning function.
Yeah.
There were a few that were using it. Unfortunately, there were a lot of IEPs that were not the right students. There was a lot of IEPs, and the importance of an IEP is to ensure that they are different. They are not the same going from year to year. And so when you were looking at two different IEPs, it was exactly that. They were cloning it. They were changing the dates. That is not the function of an IEP. The function of an IEP is really to go into detail about what is the presentation of that student? What do we need to put into place to ensure they're going to have access to their education? And so when we're looking at those IEPs, that was not what was happening. And so the cloning feature had never actually been turned on in this district until a couple years ago. And we said we're going to give it a year to see if it actually was working in an appropriate fashion. It has not been. And so it was just, unfortunately, the accumulation of things that this is when it was turned off. But unfortunately, the IEPs have not been written. And again, it's not many that were utilizing it and not functioning in the way that it needed to be.
Are you good, Eldon?
Yeah, I don't know if she answered the last part of the question.
Regarding the cut and paste feature, or?
Yeah, hang on a second. I kind of went on and on. Let me.
What was
It
the-
was a cut and paste, but then it was the the supervisor required to.
That is part of their responsibility, yes.
Okay. Has that been I guess, I guess twofold. If the supervisor are reviewing the IEPs, we don't have watered down IEPs or the same IEPs after every year. So has that been more addressed, I guess?
A lot of things have been addressed.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you, Elgin. Mr. Beaupont?
Yes, can you review again how many students of Lewiston have needs so extreme or special that we need to send them out of the district for their education and treatment?
I believe that number was 116. Don't quote me.
Do we have a price tag on that, Jake?
We do. And so there's multiple things to take into consideration when we're looking at that number. One, we do have some fantastic programs within the district itself, but then we have 70 openings for staff to support those students. And so I will just point out, and I know this was in our audit, our sixth graders from McMahon who have been successfully programmed for the course of their career in school come seventh grade. And so we did have one previously, but come seventh grade, we need to then look at, do we have something set up at the middle school to ensure that they're going to be successful, or do we not? And if we just look at last year alone, we did have to outplace a number of students because LMS did not have what was needed to ensure the success of those students. Again, we are creating that proposal of what that potentially will look like for students so they can stay within the school district.
Kim, do you have any sense, and I know this is right off the top of your head, and I know you're pretty good with these numbers, but do you have a sense roughly of about how much is paid in tuition for out-of-district placements?
4,678,000, give or take.
Where are we sending these students? What type of places, what locations?
And so that too, when just like our places are full, so are their facilities. At this point, I think we have 18 different facilities over the state that we use. We have Spurwink, ALTC, Margaret Murphy. Margaret Murphy has multiple different locations. We have Sweetser Saco, which is a newer facility, Morrison in Scarborough. We have Woodford's in 2 different locations. We even have students who are out of state.
Mm-hmm. And I guess if we had the staff, if we had the facilities, if we had the equipment, how many of those 116 could we educate in-house?
72.
Wow.
That's a
And seeing you're so good on specifics, have you estimated a cost effectiveness amount by having 72 of those in-house?
It would be a good cost saving. This is how we talked about the RISE program and the development of the RISE program. We knew how much it costs to send them out and how much it would be as a cost saving to be able to keep them in district. I think one of the things we have to keep in mind, what happens is this like phenomenon that we can't do unless we go somewhere else, or we can't do unless we have more staffing. So, and I wanted to say this earlier, so I just don't want to forget this. It is our responsibility as a school district to ensure that a student is receiving the specially designed instruction that they require to be successful. That's not about a setting, that's not about a place that they're going. And so we have students who potentially can meet a profile of, say, one of these programs. If they are full, and I think it's the misnomer of a wait list potentially, if they're full, it's our responsibility of where they are at to ensure that they're accessing what they need. And so every student, there's a special ed student in a building. So if we're saying that we're thinking a RISE program is appropriate, we will do what they need to do in their home school and do what we need to do. If they're continuously struggling and we're looking at they need additional needs, then we're gonna have a conversation of what do we do next? And I know that number is really high. And one of the things that anyone who knows me knows, I want all our students at Lewiston Public Schools. I want them to be successful. I want us to do everything in our power to ensure that they're going to be successful. We should have unconditional positive regard for every student who walks into our doors. And so that is my mission, is to ensure that that somehow is possible. Unfortunately, there are some students who do not have the capability right now. I'm not saying they never will, but right now they do not have those abilities. And so then we have to sit as a team, and it's a hard discussion to talk about, is what do we do next? And in that same breath, I then say, and what do they need to do to ensure that they can come back? Because our doors are always going to be open and we want them to come back as quickly as possible. So that really is I want that number to go down. And I know a couple of years ago, we were able to start moving that number down. I think we brought, I think it was like 31 students back into the district, and we were going in the right direction. And then we had an influx, and I know I talked about this last year. We were one of the only only school district that had a rise in student numbers. Everyone else was going on a decline, but our numbers in special ed in particular were rising. This year, our growth is declining, but our special ed numbers are still going up.
So the impediment is primarily staffing, lack of people?
And building space. And I think LMS, I think that's a big piece right now, is having the ability to, in that space, what can we do to ensure that their success?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Potvin.
All right, I just want to start with a point of order. This particular issue covers 1/4 of our budget. For me particularly, I have almost 100 constituents with students and special needs. I'm sitting here with at least 5 in-depth questions that I need to ask. We're going on 10 o'clock at night, and we inserted this into a very large agenda for the evening. I would ask that we take this and bring this into these workshops that I speak of. This would be a classic example of what we could talk about for an entire evening. I know I want to expand on what Mr. Beauplant talked about in terms of the outplacements. I get multitude of questions that I have my own constituents that have asked me to ask these questions. I don't feel I'm doing any justice at 9:44 at night. So I'd ask that this be brought back to the next available workshop only, that it would be a standalone. This is 1/4 of our budget. This has multitude of questions. You heard all the concerns just from the 2 previous committee members. And I'm sure the rest of the committee has an enormous, and I don't want to take this and bleed it out into midnight, when we can have a productive workshop sometime other.
Jake.
Yeah, I actually think chunking this out would be an excellent idea. And I think if we could walk away from this item at this point, or at some point, with some areas of focus that people really wanted to dive deeper into, and share any questions you have, we can try to come back with answers and or chunk it out to different pieces. Because I agree with you, Ron, this is a massive item. When we talked about how to present it, we were looking for an agenda where we had some time. All of our agendas seem to be pretty loaded, and I know that there's a lot of things that the members want to discuss. So yeah. I know that Pam and I and Karen have already talked about, if we need to chunk this out and revisit it, we're certainly prepared to do so.
So let me just sum it up and throw out 3 chunks at you, and if you can put it as homework and come back with it. Number 1, what Mr. Beauplant spoke of with the outplacement in terms of understanding a clear pathway of what we need to do to be able to get these students back in the district, in terms of both facilities and staffing, keeping in mind that, COVID is kind of giving us a strange opportunity here, especially with the financing that's available. And oh, by the way, it's all front loaded on special education students. So I think there's opportunities that we need to be able to look at to get into that. Second, the multitude of concerns I have from parents is the fractioning of the services throughout the district. That when their students are in need to be placed into one of the particular programs, they're taken out of the school that they know and they're moved into wherever that your program happens to exist. That these are not consistent throughout the district. And even with them going from grammar to middle school to high school, there's been inconsistencies. So I'm wondering about what a plan would look like to be able to address consistency throughout our schools, offering the services that we seem to put all in one school. What do it look like? The third one is in addressing the audit in terms of the positions. A lot of chatter out there. And part of what I did was I didn't accept the audit that was done. When you're comparing our schools with Waltham, Massachusetts, Massachusetts has a way different way of funding their school systems and appropriating. Didn't make any sense. I went and I did the top 10 districts in this state. And it's consistent that all 10, 9 out of the top 10 are able to productively spend less on ed tech positions. That Portland handles the same that we do, but yet they do it with a staff of 90 people less. Now I thought maybe that was an aberration, but when I took it the other 8 large districts, Auburn, Bonnie Eagle, Wyndham, Berwick, Massabesic, Oxford Hills, the proportion of staffing was usually 6 to 7 students per ed tech. Lewiston stands by itself at 4 students per ed tech. So I guess I would ask you to dig into that and be able to present how can we justify having that level of staffing when other districts, the other 9 districts that are large as the same similarities, not the same size, but similarities in that they're the largest in the state, are able to accomplish this with a different funding formula at a significant cost. I'm talking millions of dollars here. And I think it's important that we are able, maybe there's the reason we do need these extra positions, but they need to be justified on paper. And if we're going to be talking about other pieces, we need to be responsible for where we're spending our money. And I guess I need that question answered. So I'll leave you that as homework.
Thank you, Ron. That's helpful.
Can I just ask a clarifying for Ron?
Yes.
So when you did the comparison, did you also look at the gen ed budget versus the special ed budget?
No, I looked at the 9 special education departments with the exception of teachers. There was no significant difference in our teacher levels of the top 10 districts.
And
So my thought was, well, maybe we're doing ed techs, but others are doing teachers. And that wasn't the case. We're consistent with our population. Lewiston didn't appear to have an overwhelming, special need population. It was consistent to the population, and the teachers were consistent, but ed techs went through the roof, and so I looked at each program, each district's programs, and I couldn't find anything specific. And I don't think our students differ around the state. I think when you're talking about special needs, they're defined as you define them on your chart. And those students exist in the other 9 districts equally. So I guess I don't know what would be the process to try to evaluate that, but If you want to contact me, I'll give you the information I have. The World of Information is the National Center of Educational Statistics, is like the warehouse for everybody. So I was able to cross-reference all 10 districts through that. And then individual information, I went to the individual districts. And of course, Auburn, I know by heart anyway. So I think there's some things to look at. And the teaching piece was, I looked at it, but it didn't stand out. So I don't know if there are other areas that you can identify that would address that.
Yeah, we could definitely research that.
Mr. Majerus Collins.
I share Member Pothin's concerns about the time, about the intensity of this agenda. It does not seem like it was particularly well planned out. And I would make a motion that the school committee stand in recess until Monday, February 8th at 5:30 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Jake?
I guess I don't have a problem. I'll do what's asked. I don't know about other members who might be speaking. That's a week out. I don't know if they have other plans or things going, and I need to be mindful of them who go to work all day as well. I know these are big commitments. I also want to express, as I did at the retreat, that the number of items that people request and want within a certain time frame to be on the agendas, this is not a rare occasion. We would be doing this on a regular basis, probably through the school year, to get to all the items that have been requested.
And I didn't anticipate this discussion being this long. I know that Elgin has been asking for this to be on the agenda for a period of time, and we got it on the agenda for him, and he had very specific questions that he had shared with Jake ahead of time. So I thought that this would be a more specific to his request. I didn't realize that this presentation was going to be this broad. It's definitely needed. I think we all have a lot of questions. I have a page full of questions here myself, but I just didn't anticipate this taking up this much of this meeting. Ms. Ray.
Thank you, Chair Parks. I mentioned this during executive session, but I feel very unwell, and I think I'm going to have to leave pretty soon, and you're going to need near unanimous votes going forward. I would highly recommend that we just take this up next week and consider adding some extra nights to our schedule. There's a lot to handle right now, but I mean, this is the second week in a row. It feels like that we're going to speed right past 10 o'clock, and they're all important subjects that we should dedicate a lot of time to, and we're not being afforded that opportunity with this agenda.
Mr. Majerus Collins.
Yeah, I want to echo Member Ray's concerns. It had not occurred to me that the dwindling number of members in this meeting would reduce the school committee to having a difficult time passing things without unanimous consent. And obviously, our committee has sometimes struggled with that. I would also echo the sentiments that we should be meeting more frequently. I don't have a problem with putting in a lot more time, but I think that you start to raise real public accessibility questions when you have 5-6 hour long meetings, and frankly some pretty obvious planning questions as to why we would have meetings like that and only have them twice a month. I mean, we'd be far better off having 4 meetings a month and having them all be 3 hours than having 2 meetings a month that stretch till midnight and make it impossible for members of the public to fully participate. So, I hope that going forward, we will think about a more regular and robust schedule to avoid these kinds of outcomes. But for the moment, I would encourage my colleagues to support a recess until next Monday.
I would like to remind all members that until maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, we were meeting weekly, and there was a lot of pushback that we weren't covering enough items. And so we did bulk up meetings, and even meeting weekly, we still had very long, very heavy agendas. So I feel like we definitely have a lot of stuff that we all need to cover and that needs to get discussed and that needs to be addressed, which is part of why things really need to be prioritized. But I don't necessarily think that going to weekly meetings is going to reduce, because the more meetings we add, the more agenda items are added, are requested. So we could meet 5 days a week, every single week, and I still think our meetings would be very heavy just on the demand that people are asking to have added to the agenda.
Point of order, the motion on the table is to recess, not about future frequency of meetings.
Thank you. Any further discussion on whether to recess and reschedule the remaining items till next week? Or whether or not people will be able to attend next week? All right, Ward 1.
Question, Bruce?
We can't hear you, Bruce.
Couple of weeks.
Oh.
In a couple of weeks, aren't we also going to be starting to have additional budget meetings?
Yes.
Because I know that the calendar shows a minimum of 2 meetings a week for budget. So
correct.
Is this going to just interfere with all that as well? I'm just pointing it out. I'm fine to recess for now. The vote would be yes to recess until next week.
Thank you. Ward 2.
Not here.
Oh, yep. Ward 3.
Yes.
5.
Yes.
6.
Yes.
7.
Yes.
City Council.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion to recess until next Monday. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, it was Monday, February 8th at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you.
And it's the same meeting. It's not a different meeting. It's just
okay.
It's just we're in recess.
We will not be adding additional agenda items beyond what's already on this agenda.
Right.
And that was seconded by Member Ray, I believe.
Yeah.
And no changes to the agenda. Are there things on there that people don't feel they need to see because it took some time?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Are there items on the current agenda that people don't feel they have to have? I guess I feel like I'm getting mixed messages that there's things that we want to do, that's too much on an agenda, so how do we do our work? I just want to
Point
make
of
sure.
order, recess just means that the meeting continues at a different moment in time. If anything were to be added to the agenda, I would recommend a motion to suspend the rules at that time. Otherwise, everything from this second forward should be brought forward to the newly assigned meeting time.
And we would have to add a public input to it. Since we've already completed that tonight, would we need to
No.
add it to the future?
No,
No.
it's the same meeting. The public can comment on
Just continuing.
the pending agenda items, but it's not, there's no pledge, there's no introductions, there's no public comment. It's the same meeting.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
There would be no motion to adjourn. The chair would just announce that we are in recess until the appointed date and time.
Okay. We are in recess until February 8th.